What's up, everybody? Welcome to TPI, the Total Podcast Idiots Show. I'm idiot number one, Andrew, and today we actually have another guest host. Um, Chris.
I
Chris
think
is a
that
little more
makes me
occupied.
idiot number two today. And
Yeah,
yeah, so excited to be back.
that's right. Yeah. So this is Bridger. In case you guys didn't see that first interview we had way back in the beginnings of our show. This is Bridger, the president of Huntington University.
And hopefully I look a little less like I'm in witness protection this time than the first time. I've still got some shadows, but yeah.
In case you guys, didn't know, Bridger Huntington, he started very at the very beginning of the game, pretty much when it was still in its beta phase. And Huntington is one of the most successful historic programs in this game. LL2, a few Final Four runs, runner-up finishes.
Yep.
No
Once.
championships.
Nope.
Oh,
Nope. I
gotcha.
I had like a 25-point lead at halftime on Valpo, and then their shooting guard hit like 10 threes in the second half. That's a slight exaggeration, but that's what it felt like. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. But today we're of course talking about the national tournament, which just dropped with these brackets. And Bridger has as much experience in the national tournament as anyone. So it's a great person to bring in to analyze.
Yeah, looking forward
Yeah.
to it.
Thanks for joining me. We did some prep beforehand. We feel pretty good about like where this tournament is at. We each have one team, and you only have one team. I have my Penguins in it, and I don't know. We could even play each other in the Elite Eight, right?
That would be something. If my team is still alive in the tournament at that point, I'll just be happy to still be there. But yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Right, yeah. Huntington's, the 15 seed going up against a number 2 seeded Marist,
Yep.
who I believe was like a top 10 nationally ranked team this season.
Yeah, I believe they are currently number 5.
Wow.
So yeah,
Yeah,
30,
they're
sitting on 39 wins at number 5.
wow. They've had a really good season in LL3. Um, I was like kind of competing against them for a prospect in the current juniors. Um, we'll see. I think I could still win them because I know they want to fire their coach after soon.
Aha.
Because they posted on the forums about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, let's get to breaking down the we'll start with D1. That's certainly I don't know about the most interesting, but the one we're both in. And
Right.
I think the majority of our listeners are going to be into.
I think it's the place we can at least speak with some confidence that we halfway know what we're talking about. So
Yeah, I at least know my opponents.
yes.
All right. Do you want to share your screen, or should I share
Sure.
mine?
No, I'm happy to.
I
Let's
think you have most of the analysis for this one.
yeah, well, we can start with here's what the tournament looks like, right? And it was a little bit of a nail biter today for me and for some other teams. I know I was sitting like third from last in the bubble before today's update. Thankfully, it bumped me up a couple lines and I didn't have to sweat it out quite as much. But I think going into today there were 8 potential bid stealers, or maybe it was 7, and only 2 of them ended up winning conference tournaments. So a lot of the bubble teams got in. But yeah, Andrew, is there a place you identified as kind of the key here?
Um, I just see some interesting matchups. I see like the Alabama Crimson Tide are facing North Alabama. I always think those like in-state games are always really funny. In a tournament bracket that's supposed to kind of be random, like you got something that close.
Yeah.
You were shading towards Mississippi, and obviously we've talked a lot about them
Yeah, well,
being so
that's
good.
probably a good place to start, right? I think if we go
Yeah.
region by region,
Mhm.
is probably a good place to start. Now, if I tab, sorry for this, if I tab over here, are you still seeing the tournament screen?
I still
Or are
see the
you seeing
tournament
my
screen. Yeah.
Excel screen? Okay, cool.
No.
Um, so I think looking at the East first, and I mean the obvious first team to look at is Mississippi, right? They're in
Yeah.
first place in Legends this year. They've got 166 TPI, and just seem like the safest bet to, if you're putting odds down on a team, this is the one seed of one seeds this year.
Right, right.
And particularly, and this is where we can take a closer look. One of the things you're going to notice, though, when we tab in here, that is probably the most interesting thing to talk about with Mississippi
Oh,
is there's a 6-day injury and a 9-day injury in their
hmm.
top 6 players heading into the tournament, and that's 2 games for Frankie Cunningham and 3 games for Marvin Slater if you look at the dates on those injuries.
Right.
And so look, round one playing against an Arkansas team that finished 11th in a D4
Right.
conference and
Right.
snuck in.
Demoting.
Now they're hot, right? They're hot. They
Hmm.
just won 4 in a row in a tournament. Um, but you have to like Mississippi's chances to survive that one, even without a couple of key players. And then there's always Jeff White,
Oh.
who,
Wow.
if you've had your eyes on, recruiting over the years in Hardwood, you'll remember this name from when it first popped up. But yeah, I mean, you look back at his freshman year, he won player of the tournament as a freshman with 160 some SI, and he's another 40 on top of that now,
Hmm.
and up over 200 as a junior. And so, this is one of the players for sure, that is the hardest matchup in all of Hardwood, I'd say. And particularly you throw 20 IQ and 19 strength, which we don't know exactly how those factor into calculations, but like those are probably things that play into a lot.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, in the toughest conference in the league, how close is he here to a 50-40-90 season, right? He's shooting
Oh
44%
my
from three,
gosh. Yeah.
87% from the line, and 51% overall. So, I mean, Mississippi's the place to start, and you've got to think they're one of the favorites, particularly if they can get through 2 or 3 games, and get back to full strength. Then that's the team to beat, right?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about, I mean, Cunningham is a big, uh, still a big absence for sure, but we've talked about Laterza a lot, I think,
Yeah,
who it looks like he hasn't taken a lot of shots, but I know
yeah.
he's a starter, a power forward for them.
Yeah, so Cunningham is their leading
Actually,
scorer,
yeah.
actually,
Hmm.
over 21 points a game, also shooting some pretty strong percentages. Laterza, the guy you mentioned, is kind of the glue of this squad, right? When your top skills are IQ and defense, you're not going to pile up the counting stats, but those are the guys that make winning teams too.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean, they've got, I think, at least 3 7-foot wingspans in their starting lineup. Like in a lot of this is a team that is just loaded on SI, and then when you start looking into the peripheral stats, they're loaded there too. So we don't need to talk about Mississippi all day, but you've got to start there in the East as that's got to be the team. I think when I look down throughout the rest of the conference,
Hmm.
this is a conference that stands out to me. And one of the things that we had talked about is you look at the D1 tournament, and how many teams are in there from each conference. Now, I know this from experience, but there are 8 teams from 2.2 in the D1 tournament. And that's more than from 1.1. There are 6 teams from 1.1. But obviously what jumps out to me on the East is Wake Forest, Oregon State, Misericordia, all in the top half of this bracket, all came out of 2.2, all are probably a little better than their record, because 2.2 was just a bloodbath this season. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, you've got the number 2 and 3. You've got the top team from D1. You've got the number 2 and 3 teams from 2.2, both sitting right there. So there's a lot of strength here. It's not a cakewalk, by any means. So.
definitely, definitely. I mean, so with Slater out, who do you think is going to be the starting center for Mississippi then?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at this depth chart just shows the players who've played the most minutes at the position. So, is it possible Laterza slides over? For sure. He's got 16 ID, 13 strength. Looks like their other guy here is Johnny Eubanks, who's no slouch. I mean, do you see the wingspan and the
Yeah,
weight?
right.
I
Yeah,
mean, this team's just embarrassment of riches.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, they're in pretty decent shape to hold their own the first couple rounds. Now, the second round matchup for them potentially would be the 8 seed,
Right.
which is
So
Kansas State,
Kansas
which is
State.
another D1 team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean Kansas State, right? That's yeah, like you said, Legends team managed by Alan Chevy,
Mhm.
another like super experienced president. Um, that would be tough if they meet up in the second round.
Yeah, and Kansas State's fully healthy right now. I presumably they've played at least twice this season. So Mississippi has lost at Kansas State already once this year,
Right.
but they beat them by 27 at home and won the playoff. So, yeah, I think in this conference, I certainly look at Wake, which is a team I had trouble with. They're the 3 seed here. They have a 187 SI small forward Lenny Kaufman, who they sort of finally figured out how to use this year.
Hmm.
He's kind of a weird player if you look back at the history. Never started until this year, and
Wow.
only scores 12 points a game. But I if you've played, it is pretty tricky to get your small forward to put up a lot of points unless you're really shutting down your guards. And so this is a guy who has a big impact. But the real strength of this roster is Daquan Henderson and Caden Lloyd. They've got a pair of 6'11 plus bigs
Who can rebound really well.
who can
Looks like.
rebound and score. Yeah, they're not the most intimidating defensive team, but you're not going to get a lot of offensive boards against them, and they are going to score inside against you, even if you play like drop three defense. Believe because it's happened to me.
You've tried.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wake Forest. Okay. Um, the teams I know about in this region are Crookston and Alabama.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, with Crookston, I talked about them earlier this season with being very talented. They have some 5 stars who just haven't played at all.
Mm,
And I think that's kind of like this president's MO. I don't anticipate them playing. I think
sure.
we're talking about Peter Messina or Pete Messina, and Wes Sanders.
Yeah.
Um, those are the 5-star freshmen. And then I think I posted in Discord that, yeah, so here's Messina. He's good. It's just I don't think he'll play.
Yeah, and I
um,
mean it's interesting, right? You've got a max of 5 games. He's played zero. If you this is you can do it right now if you want
right.
to get him in there. Yeah, and then Sanders, obviously another. I mean those guys are going to be a problem pretty quick for some teams.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the starting center for Crookston is Harold Mitchell, who's not bad. I mean, he's a 15 rebound, 12 ID guy, um, 255 pounds.
yeah,
He's really good.
yep.
But is Messina better? Maybe right now even.
Yeah, and I think evaluating the question of size versus the particular skills and weight and wingspan, especially on these bigger guys, is something I know a lot of us are still learning, even
Hmm.
at the higher levels of this game. Because one thing you notice if you look around starting lineups in the top couple leagues the last few seasons is increasingly you see really successful teams with like 120 range SI bigs that they're starting over 150 or 160 SI players who are 6'8", 6'9". And when
Hmm.
I was first climbing in Hardwood, right, you were never starting a guy with 40 SI lower, or at least I wasn't. There were probably smarter people than me, but you weren't starting some guy with 40 lower SI just to pick up 2 or 3 inches of height and weight and wingspan. But I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that the effect of that outweighs a lot of flaws on a player, having somebody who's this big. So Mitchell's no slouch, even though when you look at 7 strength, 12 ID, 11 IS, these aren't like numbers that'll blow you away, but that's a solid
Yeah,
player. So,
yeah. And then the weird thing, Billy Ray White is the guy, but the weird thing with Crookston actually is Rich Burke. Um, because he is a power forward who takes over 4 threes a game.
yeah, which is just hard to do.
Yeah.
Like I know I've tried it, and I I would love to hear exactly what his game management settings are for particularly his point guard and shooting guard, and
Hmm.
then obviously his power forward, because you can't just ramp up your power forwards settings and get somebody to do that. You've got to get other people to stop doing what they're doing too. So,
Yeah, well, so the shooting guard is Billy Ray White, and he's the top scorer. So it's not like
yeah.
he's bringing him down
Right. He's
either.
probably not on minus
Right.
green light. So yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, they play pretty fast, 69 field goal attempts. So, they get the raw numbers in there. But
Yeah.
still, I was very confused. I mean, Burke took like 10 threes against me in the last
Yeah.
time I played this team. So it's very
Man,
confusing sometimes.
I will say trying to get the player you want to take the most threes on your team is, at least for me, probably the most difficult thing in this game.
Yeah.
Inevitably, whoever I don't want shooting threes goes like 1 for 10, and the guy I'm trying to game plan to get him looks like just drives inside and commits offensive fouls all game. So that seems to be how it goes. The other team you mentioned there, which is another interesting one, unfortunately for a sad reason, I think you mentioned Alabama.
Oh my gosh, they got
And
ravaged.
Alabama's got some pretty raw deal heading into the tournament. Their top two SI players both picked up a 2-game injury
Yeah.
heading in. So
And so that's their starting small forward and backup point guard, Ferris.
yeah,
And then Buck is their starting shooting guard.
yeah,
Um, so Sailor normally backs up both of those guys.
yep.
So now
And
it's
that's a
like
tough spot to
a
be in,
mess.
right? Look, a lot of these teams at this level, um, have a plan B that works, but plan C gets pretty tough.
Hmm.
And so, this is a team that was probably already fighting a little bit of an uphill battle with North Alabama, who's completely healthy, has like a six-ish TPI advantage over them.
Hmm.
Now, the one thing you'll say though is at least North Alabama's strength is at point guard, and Alabama does have their starter there who's got a healthy amount of PD.
Hmm.
And so he's got a chance to counteract Herrera, who kind of makes North Alabama go. But yeah, I look at this conference. There's a couple teams we haven't mentioned. Augsburg is a conference champion from D4.
Right. Yeah.
Misericordia, I think, is a team that caught me off guard. I picked them, I think, to finish fourth in 2.2. But when I first looked at this team, I don't know what jumps out to you, but the first thing I notice is I don't see a single 6'10" or taller
Right.
player on the roster, right? And you
Right.
get
Yeah.
up into conference two, and it almost doesn't matter how good the rest of your team is. If you don't have the size, it's going to be tough. But before the season, when I started running through, this guy's the most extreme example, but you realize there's a lot going on under the surface of this team. Almost every guy, if you click down this roster, has some freakish or multiple kind of freakish traits. Craig Curtin, who is their starting center, who you see 6'8" starting center. Uh-oh, you're in trouble in conference too. But
Yeah.
hold on, 42.5-inch vertical, 88-inch wingspan, 245 pounds, 15 strength. And this is a guy who beat up on a lot of bigger or good players this season in the conference. So that's a really strong team.
Hmm.
Rodney Jordan, Derek Miller, they've got a pair of 182 SI guards, some real strength inside. This guy, Tyson Fraley, their 147 SI, like backup small forward, I swear made like 12 threes between the 2 games I played them this season. So that's a team that held its own against Florida State multiple times this year, beat a lot of strong inside teams, and so they're one to watch out for.
So where does Derek Miller play actually?
Yeah, Derek Miller is um,
Backup big?
basically a flex power forward center. He
Oh,
does
but he's
start, but he balances his minutes out. So this is basically where, and there's a lot of teams that do this. You set your starting power forward as the backup center, and often they won't even show up as the starter in your depth chart because the minutes almost get split down the middle. So
gotcha. Yeah.
but yeah, sorry, I think I said a pair of starting guards at 182, but Derek Miller is 6'5", but he is effectively the power forward for that team. But
Gotcha.
that's the
Gotcha.
thing, right? You look at this team, you see they've got a 6'5" guy playing 12
At the
minutes a game
bigs.
at center,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you wouldn't expect them to have the success they have. So
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
um,
And you mentioned Augsburg,
yeah,
they're like back-to-back-to-back conference champions.
Yeah.
Um, and they were ranked for a good while. They had like a huge winning streak. I know.
They've got a
They're
couple of
scary.
bench players injured.
Hmm.
Their size is pretty far down the depth chart, but it is there. And multiple seniors at the top of the roster. And this is something I don't know how much any of us know, but I do think come tournament time, the number of seniors you have playing has some impact on performance. I know my third Final Four run was a team that was not as strong as the previous two, but it had six seniors. And this is super anecdotal, but that team flipped a switch for the tournament and played at a different level. And so I've started to wonder, and it'd be interesting to see if other people have thoughts on this. I think late in close games, the amount of experience a player has an impact on how things play out, and I think late in the season it has an impact on how things play out.
Yeah, and I've kind of theorized that having more experienced players in general throughout the season, like they just perform better. Uh, it might especially be true in tourney during tourney time too. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been playing long enough. I haven't gone to enough tournaments to really notice to that effect yet.
Yeah, let's make sure we're not missing anything important in this conference. I mean, I didn't even
Uh,
mention Oregon State,
yeah.
which is the team I predicted to win 2.2. I
Mhm.
think they ended up second. But Oregon State's got a player named Freddie Doty,
I've recognized
um,
the name. Yeah,
who
he's one of the best
has
scorers in all of
who
Hardwood.
has 20 OS, yeah, scored 27 points a game. But to be fair, he did take 20 shots a game this season. I
Yeah.
can't help but talk about him without pointing out this unfortunate game from my season that I lost,
Hmm.
where Freddie Doty dropped 46 on me with 11 threes, and Rich
Gosh.
Polk fell just shy with his 44
Oh,
for my
wow.
squad.
What a
Uh,
battle.
to lose by three at home. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's a team that when I looked at them before the season, I had them as maybe the third or fourth best starting lineup in the conference, but I picked them to win because they've got their coaching staff has pretty strong in-game skills, right? 18 offense, no real weaknesses there. You've
Hmm.
got a manager of the team who I believe this is the team that won the first ever national championship in Hardwood. Yep. So season one, tournament champion, and so there's a lot going with this team, and it'd be a shame to count them out as well. And so yeah, we've skipped over North Greenville, which is a
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about. They're an under 150 TPI team, but a very successful Conference 3 team who's got a couple of bench injuries, but otherwise wouldn't
Yeah.
wouldn't want to face them either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about them at the very beginning of the season. And I know maybe the first season we ran this show, it was brought up to us that like, despite having low TPIs, like this team
Yeah.
constantly is overperforming.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. This is a team that has never had 150
TPI
TPI
to end
team
the
at the
season.
end of season,
Right.
and
Right.
they've won, multiple conference championships, multiple conference playoffs, been in a lot of tourneys, and so you and I were talking about this before we got started. But I think one of the real revelations of last season and this season has been just the overwhelming amount of evidence that TPI is not the key to success in this game. It's a factor, but
Yeah.
if that's all you're looking at, you're missing a lot of what's
Well,
going on.
TPI, the measurement, TPI, our show is
Is the
definitely
key.
the key.
Watching this show is how you have success for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you look at their roster though, they're not like especially big. They have two, maybe
Yeah.
three, 6'9.5" guys.
Yep.
I haven't looked at this team super deeply, so I don't know like if Dylan Hawk is redshirting or not.
Yeah.
And then yeah, you clicked on Mims here.
Mims is a player that stood
He's
out a
good.
little when I looked at this team, and
Hmm.
I think I played them in the tournament last year and scraped out, or maybe 2 years ago, and scraped out a close win. But yeah, this is a solid team. Um, Cincinnati's another team in this bracket that historically has had some really, really good teams. I was in a conference with them a few years ago, and I don't know, I haven't looked closely at their roster, but they used to run out like a 6'9" point guard and 6'10" shooting guard, and were really tough to match up with. It looks like he's gotten away from that roster construction a little bit, but it's another manager who knows what he's doing. So it's a pretty strong region. You want to anything else there with the East?
Nothing else with the East. Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of the teams. I think it's safe to move on.
Yeah, so the Midwest, we'll just go there, and obviously we're going to be familiar with that conference.
We can
Both of
skip
our
our
teams are
games, you know, we don't
both of
need
our
to look.
teams are in it.
Yeah.
I will say there are 760 TPI teams in the D1 tournament. 4 of them are in this region. There are 6 of the top 50 players in Hardwood in this region, which is the most of any region. It's a strong group for sure.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm not one of those 160s, but I have a
No, and
top
you're
25
close
guy.
to it.
Yeah,
And like we just said, that's not the only measure that matters here. But
true, true. Let's see. So we see Florida State, of course, and they've had a
yeah.
good year. They were the champions of 2.2, right?
Florida State did finish first in 2.2. Their starting shooting guard and leading scorer is out for
Oh,
multiple games in this tournament.
maybe the whole tournament? Maybe not the whole tournament.
I didn't check that one. March 28th is going to get most of it, but I think
Yeah,
he could theoretically come back for the last game or two there.
yeah.
Still a strong team, right? You've got Schneider and Waters. Waters is at 18 shooting, 19 range player, 19 perimeter defense.
Hmm.
He's 5'9". I've been able to have my point guard score against him, but he can go off for sure. And you've got kind of an underrated, probably center if you're looking at the team here, who is one of their big keys. I mean,
Mm,
7'7"
7'7".
wingspan, yeah, and solid rebounding and defense. This is a guy who's averaging a double double in a really tough conference and
Hmm.
almost 2 blocks a game. So he's not the name that's going to jump out at you when you look at the team, but when you sit there and watch your team play against them, that's the name that's going to annoy you over and over again when it pops up for every rebound and blocks all your layups. So.
So you mentioned Thornton being out. Who do you think steps in
Yeah,
into that role? Or
it looks like I wonder if for the tournament you slide Schneider over,
Mhm,
who is, has the outside shooting skills, but you don't want to waste this 15 rebounding. I mean, this is a small forward who grabbed 7 rebounds a game, which
mhm,
goes a long way towards winning. So that's one option. Their player who played the second most here is Jim Bird, who is not going to scare anybody at shooting guard. And I think one of the things about Hardwood is no matter who your best player is, no matter what tactics you set, you're still going to find that your shooting guard ends up being your team's highest volume shooter a fair amount of the time. So you've got to have somebody there who isn't a liability if they get stuck with the ball in their hands. So
mhm.
I don't know what the president, it's not really a name to pronounce, but I don't know what the Florida State president will do with that roster, but that's a pretty tough break for a very good team.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Still, yeah, being on top of that tough conference is quite an accomplishment, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. And they get matched up with in the first round an Iowa team that I couldn't beat this season. That
Me neither.
whether
I think I faced them in non-con actually too.
Yeah, whether or not they end up doing much this season, this is a little bit of a side point, but there are 0 seniors on this roster.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So prepare if we're having the same conversation a season from now, you're probably looking at a 1 or 2 seed here. I don't know if they're quite there this year, but it's a team with a lot of size. They don't, Dwayne Anthony has 19 inside scoring. I could not score inside on this team at all. I could not stop them inside. He's got a pretty good handle on how to set up the tactics as well.
Which
And
is
DU
weird.
Deacon's a relatively new user too.
Hmm. Which is weird though, because like I just saw those, I glanced at those interior defense ratings, like they're not
Not
that
high. Yeah,
good.
you're right.
But like you said, it's a lot of size,
Yeah,
which helps balance that out with the maybe weaker IDs,
for
you
sure.
know.
So are there other teams here? I mean, you can talk a little bit about your matchup if you want.
Yeah, sure. We'll definitely talk about yours because,
Sure.
but with mine facing Washington, we actually faced each other in the Sweet 16, I believe, of
In the
Division.
D2 tournament last year?
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
cool.
and so yeah, it's funny we actually rematch right away here.
Yeah.
Um,
And when I was looking at Washington, he's
yeah,
got a power forward scoring 20 points a game,
yeah,
which
Fitch,
is
yeah.
usually a sign that you've got quite a player there.
Yeah, and Fitch is really he's very good. A 16 outside shot,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
which is probably his main weapon because he
Yeah.
actually, I know K. Henry, the president, he tries to pull Fitch out a little bit to take
Yeah.
some threes every now and then.
Yep.
Um, I know when I was facing this team last season, I was super confused on what lineup he was going to actually pull out because
Hmm.
he ran some random lineups sometimes. Fitch actually, mostly at center last year, some at power forward, but even
Yeah.
play like small forward sometimes.
Yeah.
As a 6'10 guy, it's 260 pounds.
Yeah, if you look at last season, he was flexed across three positions, playing a lot of center. It does look like this year he's a little more concentrated at power forward,
Right. Yeah.
with a double double there. But yeah, that's a tough matchup. And that weight, which I don't know how closely people look at that, but you throw 17 strength and 260 pounds down there, and that does create some problems
Yeah.
for big men that can't match up with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be tough to, stop him.
Yeah.
Um,
We can take a look at your
they're,
roster.
yeah, Washington is really big though. They
Mhm.
have, I think they start no one shorter than 6'5".
Mm, yeah,
Um, but unfortunately, I only have one player who starts shorter than 6'5" as
yeah,
well, and he's an 18 perimeter defender.
yeah. I have to say, I love your team because this is what my teams used to be: was a point guard, and a shooting guard with like 16 plus PD, and being able to set my defense however I wanted and know that the other team's guards weren't going to go off. And that's a real luxury.
Yeah, yeah. My team, actually, my point guard is kind of not great. It's actually Stucky
Oh, sorry.
there.
Yeah, I just saw you had
No
two high
worries.
PD guys. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, Mitchell, I don't know. I mean, Mitchell, I mean, I've debated starting him, but
sure.
that IQ maybe not the best. He'll
Yeah,
start next year, I think.
yeah,
He's a hell of a weapon off the bench,
for sure.
though. And but yeah, I mean, Stucky, even though he's not that fast or not that great
Mhm.
at perimeter defense, he's really tall, and I think that helps make up for a lot of that.
And 15 IQ, 15 passing, I mean, is not going to let you down at point guard for sure.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And obviously I have Clevenger. He's a top like 25 player in
Yeah,
all of Hardwood.
interestingly, in this region, he is the third highest SI player behind Schneider at Florida State and a guy named Freeman at Temple, who I'm not super familiar with, but is another strong team in this region.
They are,
But
yeah.
yeah, Clevenger, strong. I guess he's the same as Freeman, and maybe the same as Schneider. I just went by the order they were listed in the top 50, but here's another
Yeah.
good outside player
Wow,
in
look at
this
those
region.
ratings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can move on to Temple too, like
Sure.
because they had a really good year winning 4.1, but having like a top 5 RPI in nearly the
Yeah.
entire season.
Yeah.
Um, but they were like never really ranked until maybe at the very end.
Yeah.
And then yeah, you mentioned Freeman being a really, really good player.
Yeah. And Temple, just as another point, this is a team that has been consistently in the top tier of hardwood for a very long time,
Mhm.
and has, seen ups and downs with his team. But I mean, you look back, he was putting up 160 TPI rosters, what's his lowest TVI roster is a couple seasons ago 150, but other than that, it's all 155 or higher for 10 straight seasons. So
Mhm.
it's a guy who knows how to build a roster and has a ton of time playing. Big active user on the Discord as well.
Yeah, yeah,
El Jefe, which is also just a great username. So,
yeah.
but yeah, that's a scary team that knows what they're doing there too.
Yeah. Talk about your matchup against the number two
Yeah,
Maris.
I've had a little bit of time to scout this today. We'll look at is this Marist? I don't actually
I
know.
say Maris, like a
Let's say
shorter.
Marist. I like
Yeah.
that. So this is the number 5 ranked team in the nation. Um, the real strength of this roster, it's strong all around, but the real strength of this roster is these two big guys, Buckley and Tillman.
Hmm.
And so uh, Tillman, obviously 17 strength, 18 rebounding, 17 ID. I mean, the guy only shoots, 8 shots a game, but he makes 5 of them. And one of the good things for me maybe in this game is I don't rely on scoring inside a ton. The problem with that is it's hard to be real successful in hardwood if you're not effective scoring inside, but at least it means this isn't as bad a matchup as it could be
Right.
for me. And then Buckley is sort of the opposite interior player in
He's like
just
the offensive threat,
yeah,
you
just
know?
in that he scores 19 points a game
Yeah.
as a power forward, which means he's got his team set up in a way that you can get the ball to him. And while these stats aren't all, while his skills aren't necessarily the highest, this is like we've talked about with some other players. You look over here and you see 7'5" wingspan and 40-inch vertical, and that covers up a lot of flaws as well with somebody that big. So.
Right, right. Yeah. And with Marist, uh, I'm not sure like their tactics that they typically run.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
one of the tools I've used more and more this year is this button down here, conference statistics.
Mhm.
So I don't know how much other people use this, and I didn't use it a ton before
Yeah.
this
I
season.
don't really use it.
But you can look in their conference and sort the conference by their average distance shot as a team, and they are the lowest in their conference. 7.2
Mhm.
is a very low number. This is a team that scores 45 and a half points in the paint per game out of their 92 and a half points. So, I mean, their tactics are very clearly jam the ball inside. They take 12 threes a game,
Click
which,
on possessions.
yep.
Because usually when I use this, that's what I click
They
most.
are roughly the middle of the pack, so
Middle of the
probably
pack. Yeah.
playing a somewhat neutral pace. 80 possessions game, maybe a little on the slow side of the middle. So
I actually interpret that as high.
interesting. Maybe I just
Yeah.
played in a really fast conference this season. So
I think I've seen at least as you go up, the teams get faster and faster
okay,
in terms of their
yeah,
pace.
yeah,
Because like my team, Dominican, and even my New York team, we typically run in like high 70s, maybe mid 70s. And like I'm running like with Dominican, I'm running like slight positive
okay,
tempo.
okay,
Yeah. Now, I mean, of course, that's influenced by
interesting.
the other teams we're playing against too.
For sure.
Maybe they're slowing it down.
Well, right. I know. So if we go to, and maybe I'm just misremembering this, but if we go to the conference I played in this season, I feel like, yeah, I mean, our upper end was 90, 89,
Oh
88
my gosh.
on a lot of these
Yeah,
teams.
your second to last is still 81.
Right. And that's where I was thinking maybe that was a little on the slow side. But what we've probably found is I had the numbers from one very specific conference in my head that may have just been an unusually fast one. So.
Yeah, I mean, all types of tactics are run all over hardwood for sure.
Sure. So yeah, my team we won't dwell on. I'm finally healthy. I think 11 of my last 13 games I've been missing at least one starter, and
Mhm.
two in several cases. So I am excited for that. Rich Polk, I was excited to make the tournament just so he gets to play a few more games. Then the thing with my team this season is last season Polk was taking 18 shots a game, scoring 23 and a half, and that's because 3 of my starters were redshirt freshmen, and he was the whole team. So the nice thing about this season has been I was able to ratchet down the settings on Poke a little bit. He's getting a few more assists, driving and kicking a little bit. He's obviously got a really nice right side of his skills and some gaps over here on the left, but I'll miss his 17 PD for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, my team, the reason it's a little bit of a tough matchup with Marist is I only have two even half decent big men, and those are Bailey and Griggs, and both have some pretty serious gaps. Griggs doesn't score at all, and that's my center, and Bailey doesn't rebound at all, and that's my power forward. So we patch it together, and my very high TPI team can still get abused pretty badly, and that's why I was a sixth place team in Conference 2, despite having a very high TPI this season. So
Gotcha.
and
Yeah.
teams know how to take advantage of that for sure. So.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see if Marist can though. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still an LO3 team, which is strong, but
Yeah, and my
playing
team,
LO2.
when Bailey and Griggs are both healthy, has had a fighting chance against some very good teams. Held
Mhm.
its own again, beat Florida State once this season, beat some other teams. So I certainly think there's a chance there, but Marist, I think, has to be one of the favorites, especially with Florida State with the significant injury. Temple I'd put up there. I think you guys have a shot for sure. One of the names that jumps out to me here is this Western Washington team, and that's only because I was in D6 and D5 and D4 and D3 with Western Washington, and they
Uh-huh.
finished ahead of me like several seasons where we both promoted, but they were the team with me. So it's been a long time since I've paid any attention to this team.
Yeah.
But another
Wow,
user that's
2.73s.
been
It's good.
around a long time. I don't think that
Yeah.
roster has the size to be a real threat.
They've
In
got a
the
6'9" shooting guard who might also be a center, a Jim Hess.
He's got a max shooting guard and center
Huh.
position rating. It does look like
He doesn't play.
he
He might
doesn't
be
even play. So maybe he's redshirting this
redshirting.
season. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not a team I've been super familiar with. Yeah, it
Oh
looks like
yeah,
he's
for
a
sure.
JUCO player that is getting redshirted this season.
Gotcha.
So
Interesting.
um, that's a pretty hard set of position ratings to achieve. So
Yeah.
a little curious how that happened, but
Yeah.
uh,
There was a
go
team I
ahead.
wanted to point out in this region as well. Go to North Carolina A&T, actually, if
Mm,
you would.
for sure.
So my New York team, New Rochelle, is in the conference with this team. They won the regular season, I believe.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, they were the 4.3 champion.
yeah, and so the main guy here, he's right at the top. He'll be right at the top when you restart. Kreider.
Yep.
Um, he's one of the best players in the Hardwood universe.
Yep.
You see that whole right column being double digits, really strong. And he's their main scorer. He shoots a bunch in general. I think he drives a lot more than like what
Mhm.
I would typically think of for a point guard, really, even especially with 18 and 14
Interesting.
in
Yeah, I want
LSM
to look
range.
at a recent game because that's one of the best ways to see that. So yeah, that game it looks like he got stuck shooting a bunch of threes, but
Go to like the statistics page though.
okay.
Because that'll show you the
Yeah.
average and
Yeah.
all. He has like a 12.8 distance, which
There you go.
it's like
Yeah.
mid-range.
Yeah.
And just like 7 threes a game, which is not nothing, but
Yeah.
you
But he's
we've
scoring
seen guys
five.
with
He's
more.
scoring 5 points in the paint a game too. So,
Right.
yeah.
And the other thing I look at is like he's drawing nearly 4 fouls a game.
Yeah.
Um, and so I mean that's in general just high usage, but to me
Yeah.
that's driving a lot as
No,
well.
I mean this is the one of the first seasons I've ever had a team where I had my guards on inside setting a lot more than on outside setting. And when you actually like watch through the game as it plays out, there are a lot of fouls drawn in those situations. If
Mhm.
you like watching your team's shots get blocked, have your guards drive to the basket a lot. It's so, but it can. I mean, there are games where just the advantage you get from drawing fouls and just the while it's I joke about shots getting blocked, like still when the game says so and so goes up for the layup, there's a pretty high percentage that shot's going in,
Mhm.
and so creating situations for your team to get to that position, and having guards drive is one of the big ways to do that for sure.
Yeah. Anything else with this
Crown's
region?
another team that just stands out just because you see that name every year in the top 25. He's made tournament runs before.
Mhm.
His starting center is hurt. And so, but I mean, this is the 5 seed in the conference. This is a team that finished second in a conference 3. Um, So the real challenge there is anytime you're missing one of your big guys, it's hard to build a lot of depth there. For Crown, that means you're replacing Graves with thankfully a 7-footer, but one who can score inside and then has some gaps other than that. But shoot, 315 pounds, you've got some different problems there. So I think even with that injury, that's a team that could come out of this conference as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Or out of this region as well. So
Yeah, 315 pounds, 18 strength,
yeah,
7-footer, obviously. Like, yeah, the ratings may not be super strong in rebounding and ID, but
but you don't want your guards driving in there to
yeah,
have to go up against him. Yeah.
right, right. Chowan being at number 3.
Yep. We've kind of
Um,
skipped over one of the important teams there.
just want to make sure to hit them.
Yeah, they've
We've
got a
talked about them before, though.
They've got a point guard averaging 20 points a game in Preston Dempsey. A little bit of a defensive liability, but
Mhm.
makes up for it. Obviously, super strong right side, great shooter. That's one of the successful point guard models. 20 points a game,
Sheesh,
decent
yeah.
decent shooting percentages. And then they are missing for at least the first game. They're
First
starting
starting
shooting
shooting guard.
guard. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and so depending who you end up with
Wow, that kid's good.
behind Lewis there, you're taking a very strong player. And if this is, he may have another plan or this team may have another plan, but that's a pretty big challenge. And
Mhm.
in round one, Chowan is taken on
Cal
a
Baptist.
a very strong Cal Baptist team who did finish third in D4, which gives you some questions about, is this a team that's going to go on a run in a tournament? But 153 SI. Do you know much about that team?
I do, yeah. They
Albin JJ is a name I know. Yeah.
they are very strong on the perimeter defensively and not so much
Oh
interior.
wow, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
Their
I
top 5 SI players all have
yeah,
14 PD or more.
yeah, yeah. And like Hubbard, Bourne, Kent, that's their starting 1, 2, 3, and then Foot as their starting power forward.
Yeah,
Um, they're strong there. I
got
think,
some shooters too. It's a very
yeah,
outside oriented team.
very much. I think I forget if they press a lot. I think
Mm,
they have the tools to, but I'm
yeah,
not sure they do as much as I would think they would based on all of these ratings. Um,
I mean, we can
yeah,
just
let's just
check a
take a look.
recent game.
Yeah, any random game.
Yeah, it looks like 15% in their last game. I mean, I'm not going to click through all of them, but they're
Yeah.
not probably not a team that's dedicated to doing it all the time. So
Right. Yeah. And I mean, they've been successful, obviously.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, to me, when I see those ratings, I'm like, I'm preparing for a huge press,
yeah,
really.
yeah. You
So
want to
it's
move on to
interesting they don't.
this? You want to check out the South?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. So the 1 seed in the South
What
is
do we
another
got?
D1 team, Tarleton State.
And they play Boise State, who like stole a bid, right?
Boise State was one of the 2 teams. They were the 6th place team in 4.5. So 4.5 ended up putting 5 teams into the tourney,
Except
which
except number 3 didn't make it.
right. A little bit of a sad story there. Who was that team? I'm trying to remember.
Franklin and Marshall, I believe.
Yeah, so Franklin and Marshall, and one of the things we were going to talk about, and maybe we can take a break from our regional breakdowns if you want, and talk about some of the snubs or surprises.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Sure.
so just to break it up a little bit, but that's definitely one of those teams right there, finishing third in a strong conference.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're happy they're promoting, I'm sure. So it's not like a completely lost season.
Yeah,
But they had the 60th ranked RPI. So I mean, it wasn't like super duper strong.
yeah.
They were definitely like in danger, and clearly they got hit.
Right. Yeah, so they're down here at 60 in RPI. There's actually
Oh wait,
uh,
that's
no,
Francis
that's
Marion.
Francis
They
Marion.
were
Sorry, Franklin and
71. Sorry,
Marshall is 71. Yeah.
that's
So
my
there
mistake.
are 2 teams up there though that, I almost feel bad for having a bid when Ohio Dominican and Francis Marion are up here in the top 60 in RPI and don't get in. So those are a couple of the teams. I think some other teams that at least present interesting cases are, for me, Texas Pan Am is a team that won 33 games, I believe. if I can find them
Oh,
here.
you just skipped over. You just had it. Yeah,
There we
there
go.
you go.
So Texas A&M's a team that won 33 games and just couldn't get their RPI up. I don't know if they scheduled down, but that's a lot of wins to not make the tournament. And
Yeah.
then they went to the finals
Oh,
of their conference playoff and almost got in that way, but ran into a buzzsaw in Augsburg.
yeah.
And so that's probably one of the real tough luck teams for me of not getting in. You look at Butler and Louisville, who I'm not saying either one should be in, but those are both top 5 teams all time in Hardwood who had winning records this season. So it's just a surprise not to see them in the tournament.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um,
Um, let's see. Yeah, Texas A&M was the highest ranked team by RPI to not
mm,
get in, and
yeah,
at 57. So
yeah.
again, it's not like a super strong resume. It's not like a top
Man, it's
40
a
team.
little bit of a sad thing that that Texas A&M team is not in, but they would have been the 9th team from 2.2, so it makes some sense. But that
Yeah.
means if we're going to talk about any players who aren't in the tournament, that means Roy Ferry is not in the tournament, who is, I think, 19 IS, 18
Ooh,
ID, 19 rebounding,
wow.
and just an absolute monster. And they've got a power forward as well named English, who
Mhm.
my team can't stop at all. So that's a team that if they get the right matchups beats anybody, and especially if they stay out of foul trouble, and that was their problem.
Yeah.
Another team that just for a different reason you're surprised not to see in the tournament, and I think we all love Tough. We know him from the Discord, but Texas State, just kind of a series of unfortunate events for him this season. He's got, I think, a top 5 or 6 TPI in the whole game. Uh,
Yeah.
and Trevor Wheeler is one of the highest SI players in the whole game at
Hmm.
194, and just a player that I know Tough complained about him a few times in the forum as well. Just a player who never quite performed what you'd expect from the SI. He even benched him a little bit late in the season
Oh,
and
wow.
lost a couple games by only like 5 or 10 points after he had been losing by 20 plus with Wheeler in. So a little hard to
Sure.
explain.
Hmm.
But and then I think probably the biggest omission from the tournament, just that's a little sad to see, is Richard Love's not in the tournament.
That's right. Yeah, Portland. Wow. Richard Love couldn't carry his team in, huh?
You and I talked about this before this started. I think there are what did I say? 21 of the
21
top
of 50.
50 SI players in Hardwood are not in a tournament at any level, or 21
Yeah.
are in,
Are in it.
29 are not.
Yeah.
And Richard Love's kind of the shining example of that just having one really good star player isn't quite enough to carry it takes more than that. And that's a good thing about the game.
Definitely. I think we'll get into that even more in the other tournaments. I mean,
Yeah.
Portland had another really good player, I think. Maybe that was last season.
We can take a look at them. I'm just going to search it because I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have.
I can't remember their exact roster. Obviously, Richard Love. Um, maybe it was Stamper, but Stamper was last year, I know. But I thought they had someone else.
Yeah, it looks like they've got a stable of 160s, which honestly, this is a strong roster.
Yeah. I mean, I have a stable 160s.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah, this is a
that's
strong
interesting.
roster. You wonder if there's some game planning stuff that could take this to the next level for the squad. But Portland is a team that's had some recruiting coups over the years. If
Sure.
he,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's still another year of Richard Love, so we'll see what comes with that. I mean, good grief, 20 IS, 20 ID as a non-redshirted junior. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, definitely. All right. What else? What other
Yeah,
teams do we
you want
have?
to.
Or
Those were
we
the
have to
teams I
start.
had identified as sort of the surprises or snubs. Do you want to jump to the south?
Yeah, let's jump to the south.
Moving through.
Let's see. Yeah, so you we were starting on Tarleton.
Yep.
So we can continue on with them. Let's
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I think they're the lowest TPI of the 4-1 seeds by a good margin, but this is a team that finished in second place in 1.1. So, that kind of answers any questions you have there.
Mhm.
Um, Interestingly, you almost wonder, for me as someone who didn't pay that close of attention to 1.1, I'd be interested to know the secrets to this guy's success, because there's not a ton of height on this roster. It's not the highest TPI team, but really put it together in a tough conference and won a lot of games.
Yeah, I know. I forget who in the Discord, but someone like big fans of the way this president has consistently game planned,
Yeah.
seemingly outperformed TPIs, as you said. And yeah, Ben and Legends been really
Yeah.
successful now. I guess only Ben and Legends this year, but
Mm.
been moving up
Yeah, but
for a while.
a steady climber here clearly over the last 5 seasons who kind of
Mhm.
got things figured out, right? Was floating in 3-4 and then has gone second, 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 fourth, third in his conferences the last 5 years and second
Yeah.
again in first. So he's got some stuff figured out. I mean, these are the kind of teams who uh, when you're struggling to figure out your tactics, or at least when I'm struggling to figure out my tactics, I pick one of these teams and just pick a game they won recently and just copy everything I can from the tactics and see what happens.
And they've actually won 4 out of the 5. Well, not this season. 4 out of the past 6 now conference tournaments.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. Wow.
Yeah.
Not this season
Didn't
though,
do it
but
this season, but that's in 1.1, right? You've got other
yeah,
teams who know how to put that together. So
definitely.
yeah, this team, has 5 double-digit scorers. They've got a point
Point
guard
guard.
who scores 19 points a game, 3 rebounds, 7 assists. I mean, that's putting in a lot of work. Look at those, scoring
Shooting. Yeah.
ratings.
Hmm.
It's always a shame when you have a guy with 15 finishing and 7 driving, but you'll still take it. So, yeah, strong
Yes.
team got to be one of the favorites in the South.
Yeah, for sure. Like you
And
said,
then
not a lot of
the next
size though,
team.
but
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, like you said, not a lot of size though, but um, I remember talking about them at the beginning of the year,
Mm,
and I think it was Wyatt Eddy and obviously yeah, Albert's in there. Let's see, I gotta relook at it.
Sorry, I can
No, it's
pull
okay.
that roster back up.
I got it on mine too, but yeah, I mean Southard the center looks like
Hmm.
a really good player.
Yep. 18 rebounding,
Yeah,
16 ID, yeah, 15
15
strength.
strength.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
pretty solid.
that's a really good mold to look for in your big men, right?
Mhm.
You can, chasing IS can be hard. Those, in my experience, those players get recruited the hardest. The guy who says very good or dominating post player, those are the ones that get all the attention. And you can come away with really good players like this who don't have that big comment in the post player.
Mhm.
But if you can scout out that somebody's gonna stack a lot of their points in rebounding ID and strength, and you can fill up your roster with talented perimeter players and prioritize your recruiting points there, that's a model to building some good teams.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, well, I'm trying to see what else I just noticed with this team. I mean, good outside shooters.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting team.
And I mean, you've got the pieces of a really strong defense here. I don't know exactly how he lines up, but you've got
Right.
3 above average perimeter defenders, 2 strong inside defenders.
Mhm.
This it's just a well-rounded team.
Yeah, one thing I would note though is the depth, at least in terms of just looking at SI, which again is not everything, but there's a big drop off right after that top 5,
Yeah.
right after Eddie. So, it's something, if you got to look at something for number 1 seed, I mean,
Well, and
that's
I
it.
think one of the things about the depth is in a one game sample, it doesn't matter that much, right?
Sure.
You need 7 players to win a hardwood game, right? You need 7 players that can play without a big drop off, and you don't need more than that.
True.
But over the course of a season, the depth plays out as very important as you deal with injuries, fatigue, hot and cold streaks, etc. And so it's interesting once you get to the point of the tournament. These teams that struggle a little bit with depth, almost it mitigates some of that to where, hey, if I just stay healthy for these 5 games, I don't need more depth than this. But this is also the kind of team where if you get 1 or 2 injuries, you're in a lot of trouble really fast. So.
Yeah, I mean, even in one game, like when I see a short rotation, like
Sure.
I definitely think of it as an advantage for
Hmm.
me that I can
Hmm.
try to exploit. You're right, it probably doesn't mean as much
Hmm.
as compared to the whole season.
Sure.
But if you run your tempo higher, you've got a higher chance to get people in foul trouble or
For sure.
fatigued. Um,
For sure.
and then if you're just confident your bench is better than theirs, then
Yeah.
that's where you attack them.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you're right. Like definitely it's less meaningful than the whole season.
Well, yeah, and I completely agree with what you're saying. I just also am coming from a place this season where I really tried to leverage depth and found, that there are games where, you know, it's tough to do that. Even I've experimented with tactics of super high pace, balancing out minutes really well across 9 or 10 players,
Mhm.
and there are times it seems to work, and then there are times just like, man, if I would have just had my best five out there for more of the game, maybe that would have done it. So it's one of the many interesting questions, of this of trying to balance out what's my optimal strategy with what's needed to beat this team, and how far am I willing to go away from my optimal strategy to leverage a weakness in that other team. So
Right. And we also talked about it a little beforehand too. It's like how much of it is tactics versus just like your team is more talented than the other
yeah,
one.
yeah,
You can feel like you're doing stuff, but like maybe
yeah,
you're just more talented.
yeah. Yeah. So otherwise in the South here, I mean, I think Rhode Island is a conference champion, strong
My
team.
conference, I
Okay.
did not like them.
Yeah. I mean, tell me about Hartman, because that's the one
Yeah.
that jumped out to me looking at that team.
Yeah, he's like 7'1.5". He's a tremendous interior scorer. Um, I think he wasn't honestly, I don't remember. I remember trying to like attack him. I don't
Yeah.
remember everything about him, but you see the weak interior defense at
Yeah.
9, but with a 7'7" wingspan, 250 pounds.
Yeah.
I think the scary thing is obviously the height
Yeah.
and the inside shot with the strength being, it's pretty good. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the guy's shooting
yeah.
65% from the field, against tough competition, because your conference was no joke,
Yeah, yeah.
especially at the top of it. So
Right. I was able to beat this team twice
mm,
though,
yeah,
because this is one of those teams that is pretty short on depth. Like they
yeah,
had a 7-man rotation.
okay,
Um, and
yeah. Wow, 4 players at 170.
right. And then yeah, two more, three more basically at 160. The
Yeah,
issue with this team, Hartman obviously super scary,
yep.
but Rashawn Wall is the power forward and he's six
Mm,
two and a half.
that's a problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And he's
and I
also
mean,
weak on interior
yeah,
defense.
yeah,
It's not going to be pretty when this guy is your starting power forward.
right, right,
Um,
and when another team finds a way to leverage that, they're going to do that, and so, yeah, this maybe is a team that you look at as a potential, upset for somebody early
I think
on,
so.
just who finds the right matchup with them.
Mhm.
Though their first round matchup against North Carolina looks pretty decent. North Carolina, not a bad team by any means, but also a Conference 4 team,
Mhm.
finished second place, got about a 10 TPI deficit there, and kind of just snuck into the tournament. So,
Yeah,
I mean, Evansville jumps out, right, for several
definitely,
reasons.
definitely.
Evansville is the team that has sort of defied logic the last couple years. Golf Hogan, I think,
I
is
think
the
it's Gulf Hogan.
president.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had a non-conference rivalry with him for 8 or 10 seasons. We've been in a conference together multiple times. Message him back and forth some. If you remember from the last time I was on here, he stole my only recruit I ever really wanted from my hometown.
That's right. Yeah,
But man, he's really got it figured out here these last couple seasons. And this is
yeah.
another one of those teams where, just the 7-1 guy has a pretty big impact.
275 pounds. Yeah, 7'6" wingspan.
Yeah.
Not the best, like highest ratings in scoring, but the defense and the rebounding is definitely there. Yeah,
Yep.
and he scores a bunch too. I mean, it's not like he's a slouch offensively.
For sure. Yeah. And he took me down in non-con this year. Turner had 18 points, 19 rebounds.
Wow.
That's the thing that happens sometimes with guys that size in this game is if the game engine lines up right and they can get the ball to him, you just watch him dunk it over your poor interior defenders over and over again. So
Yeah, and remember they're defending national champions, so as you said,
yeah.
defies the odds. Yeah.
Yeah, and Evans, yeah, they're fully healthy, defending national champs. They don't necessarily have an easy matchup. I mean, Nova is a team that's been good for a long time, in Hardwood. and has a strong roster as well. So,
Mhm.
but last year it didn't matter who you threw against Evansville and how much it looked like they were obviously going to lose. They just kept winning. So it'll be interesting to see right here, right off the bat. You've got a team with three 180 SI players that
Okay.
Evansville's going against. So
Yeah, yeah. I think I did I play Villanova with Dominican this year? I think I did.
let's see.
I'm pretty sure I won, but
Yes, they lost to you at home. So
yeah, yeah, big win for my team.
yeah, big game for Clevenger there. I mean, their top player Turner was matched up head to head with Clevenger and had a pretty rough shooting day.
Mhm.
And so, sometimes that's just a rough shooting day,
Yeah,
because we all know that sometimes Hardwood just decides one of your players is going to miss all of his shots on a day, even if the matchup is really in that player's favor. But
right, right.
yeah, definitely a team that maybe similar to some of the other teams we've talked about, Texas State or whatever, just doesn't quite live up to what it looks like on paper, and that's why Nova is a 13 seed when that
Right.
roster looks like it could be something much higher.
Yeah, I mean, with that top end talent, they could, go on a run, do something if they really figure out a way to leverage those guys correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What
The
else do we
the
got?
other high
Sorry.
seeds here. I mean,
Yeah.
Clark is a first place team in a conference three, healthy coming into the tournament. Not a team I know a ton about, but a name
Yeah.
you've seen in high divisions for several seasons in a row. So
Right.
not a team to count out.
Right. Yeah, I don't know a ton about them either. It looks like to me, Seth Mims is probably, one of the most important players on this team.
Yep.
Um, just with this, just with the combination of size and
Yep.
strength and defense. Um, yeah, and
Yeah,
from California, oh boy, how did I miss that
their
guy?
first round matchup is a
Against
team I'm at
Georgia.
least a little familiar with. Georgia
Mhm,
Tech has
mhm.
one of my favorite players in Hardwood, just because how many times have we seen 20 perimeter defense in this
Wow.
game, period?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think so I've talked about Polk a couple times on my team. I think the first time we played Georgia Tech this season, because they're in my conference, Polk scored like 6 points or something, right? Even with me running the offense through him that game, and that was with Gordon. And they move Gordon around. What Georgia
Mhm.
Tech does is, at least what they were doing earlier in the season, is putting him man on the other team's best perimeter player, and sometimes it
That's
works out pretty
interesting.
well for them.
Yeah.
They finished middle of the pack in a very tough conference, so definitely a team that could surprise. But Clark's a very strong team.
Yeah. We see Ursinus down, a Legends team down as the 10 seed.
Yeah, matched up with
That's
NYU.
interesting.
I mean, those are
Hmm.
two teams that have had a lot of positive history here recently.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be a pretty crazy matchup to start for the first round.
Yeah, Ursinus, a sixth place team in Conference One this season. Not a lot of size at the top end of their roster. I'm not
Hmm.
super familiar with NYU, but I know they finished. I know, at least when we were doing some previews for Conference Two in Discord, this looks like one of the strong teams in 2.1 next season. And they're a little young, just one
Yeah,
senior, and
yeah.
so I don't know if this is the year, but they do have some of the size that they could leverage in that matchup.
So I'm pretty sure either the Iowa president and the NYU president are brothers or like sometimes run by the same guy at times.
Yeah,
So I know they're very similar philosophies. So
yeah,
Iowa's super tall, NYU's got a lot of size. I
yeah,
think, yeah, very similar philosophies there.
yeah. And a lot of
Yeah.
success, and I don't think either team, they're relatively new compared to some of the teams at this level, and having a lot of success. So very impressive there.
Go to the 8-9 matchup. Yeah,
Of
we
course, we
got
have to look at the
five.
8-9 matchup. If you don't
Yeah,
know, Cal State Monterey Bay is Steve's team of
yeah.
all 1 and 2 star recruits that he embarrasses us all of us with consistently. He
Yeah,
does have a significant injury heading
yeah.
into the tournament.
Yes, he
Lonnie
does.
Lynch is his starting center. But yeah,
It's
Steve
unfortunate.
knows how to set up his tactics, and proves it to us all the time, and
Yeah,
recruits really effectively in the lower tiers of recruiting.
yeah. I mean, his defenses are like right, perfectly placed. Nothing really wasted. It seems like the
Yep.
speeds on those two guards up there, Held and Holmes.
Yep.
And I know I skipped over Nichols up there, who can really shoot, it looks like.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's I know these players aren't highly ranked, but like the points are just in the right spots.
Yep.
Like I said, nothing wasted, which is
No,
really
that's
cool.
it. And that's that conversation we've been having about, what we're really learning here as people get more better and better at this game is that it's not just a TPI arms race, like it was in the early seasons, or at least
Mhm.
that was my experience in the early seasons.
Yeah,
There's a lot more to it. And Cal State Monterey Bay is matched up against Fuzzy Bananas, Western Michigan team.
yeah, yeah.
And the cool thing about this team is this guy, Joel Knight. Um, Joel Knight has a massive wingspan vertical. He's 6'7".
Wow,
And if you look at his minutes this season,
he's played all.
he starts at point guard against my team
Mhm.
when we play, and he beats me with Knight at point guard because Knight is big enough to shut down Polk. He starts at have seen him start Knight at power forward in certain matchups. But yeah, this is like the Swiss Army knife of hardwood players here, right? Big
Gotcha.
strength,
Yeah.
big speed, can defend in and out, rebound, shoots, high IQ. You can put him
Hmm.
anywhere, and he's got position eligibility maxed at the three backcourt spots. So
That's a heck of a weapon to be able to use. Yeah, and move around.
and I mean, he's definitely not a one man team. Lynch is good. Friend is good. I believe is that their backcourt is Lynch and Friend. They're a
Ah,
big. This is a 6'6", 6'4", 6'6", 6'6", 6'10". So the top end size isn't there, but there's size across that lineup. Their depth bigs are big. Nelson Friend being hurt does have an impact though.
yeah, yeah. I know Fuzzy's not too happy with that happening recently.
I believe he said, "There goes my tourney run" or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and um, yeah, he had a little bit of, ran into Florida State and had a big injury, so
yeah.
that's a tough end there. But you get through a couple games and get Friend back. That's a team that has some serious weapons too. So
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, is there anything else we haven't gone
I'm
over
trying to
here?
see if we're disrespecting anybody badly by not mentioning
Loyola
them.
Chicago, Molenberg, yeah.
Muhlenberg's a team that snuck into the last promotion spot, out of
Oh, wow.
3.4 on the last day of the regular season. I think it was Miami and Muhlenberg
Ooh.
that were going into the last day, and Miami was ahead. And so that's a 2.2 team next season. Loyola Chicago, that's the team we needed to mention that we didn't, just because of some sad news
Oh
that,
no.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So Tom Stewart, who is probably,
He's
right
the
up
top. He's
there.
like the number two junior in the
Yeah.
nation.
Yep. And that 16-day injury, I didn't scout out exactly how deep that goes, but I mean, I think that's either 4 or 5
Yeah, yeah,
games.
yeah.
And so, look, this isn't a one-man team, but when you have a player like that and you take him out of the lineup, it's a different team.
Definitely, definitely. Wow. I mean, it's not over for them, of
Yeah.
course, but that's a big loss for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's quite a bit there. The other team, just the other thing I noticed going through here that I thought was kind of unique, this
Mhm.
Central Washington team that plays San Diego in the
Oh, I
first
know
round,
nothing about them.
they have in their conference schedule, what did I put down? I think I wrote, yeah, they have 6 players averaging 11 to 13 points a game.
Hmm.
And that's all their guys who play 20 minutes or more. So I don't know if I've seen a team quite this balanced.
Yeah,
And it's something that I think is really desirable in hardwood. This, being hard to game plan against, I think one of the things we all look to at the next team is like, all right, who's the leading scorer? Who takes the most shots? What am I going to do to stop them? And a team like Western Michigan, who has Joel Knight, who's going to guard the other team's best player, and that's part of your main strategy, you don't
you
really have a
can't
way
do
to
that.
leverage that strength here. So
Right.
I don't know that this team is a threat to go super deep, but just an interesting one. San Diego, I believe, has. No, I'm wrong. I was going to say they've had some pretty big time recruits here recently, but I must be thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, but I know that they just have a really solid team. Like Thomas Kane is the guy actually,
Yeah.
way down.
When they've
He's like
got
their best player.
they've got 9 guys with 140 or more. So this is
Hmm.
a deep team.
You look at the players of the game for Kane though. I mean, He's got 72 in his
Holy
career.
cow. Yeah.
So yeah, when I say he's the guy, he is the guy
Yeah.
for this
Well, and
team.
this is another example of what we're just talking about, right? He's 144 SI, 10 pot, but the points are in the right place.
Yeah,
For
18
sure.
IS,
Yeah.
yeah, 16 rebounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to overlook that team, I think,
Yeah.
but they're a sixth seed for a reason. They were like the top team in D2 last season
Yeah.
for a good reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's move on to the West.
All right, in the West, your one seed is Texas Arlington. They've also got the top SI player in the region in, I think it's TJ Connolly is his name,
Right.
or
Sounds
something.
familiar.
Yeah, and so we can take a look at them, but this has to be considered one of the teams with a chance to make a deep run.
Hmm.
Just with the success they had, this was a first place team in 3.2, 163 TPI, and you've got a superstar there at the top of the roster.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, a great defender and pretty solid shooter. Um, he kind of like does it all a little bit, but not like everything
And I
really.
think
It's
the thing that jumps out is for me is this
oh wow.
opponent's field goal percentage of
Hmm.
36 over the course of a season. Yeah,
Yeah,
this guy's doing it on both ends of the floor. The percentages aren't great.
yeah,
Um, but obviously a successful team. I don't know if that's my number one. I mean, you've got to think Tennessee is one of the teams to beat in this whole tournament,
national
despite not
runner-up last
yeah,
season.
despite not having a really high top end SI player. Nathaniel Hughes is a problem.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and he's like some of those other big men we've looked at where the defense looks weak, but we know what some of these peripheral skills can help make up for that. And Hughes, I believe, is the player of the tournament last season.
I believe
Um,
so. Yeah. I mean, he had
now,
a crazy
one
run last year. I
one
remember.
thing we can say though, and I've both benefited from this and suffered from this, is the code was only letting players from 1.1 get into the all tournament teams and player of the tournament teams. And I know Steve said after last season, I think he's fixed that now. So that'll be cool to see this year, that'll actually play out right. But I mean,
Yeah.
this is a big time player who, when he's on the floor, is the guy. So
Yeah, and they were third in Legends, so they certainly have
yep.
like the track record this season, and certainly track record of previous seasons. One of the most experienced presidents
Yep.
running them and in TPS.
Yeah, he's got a
Yeah.
couple of backups hurt to start
Hmm.
things out, but you've got to think Tennessee's a big contender. And I mean, right then you go to the 3 seed, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Oh
This
wow,
is
Hodge.
another. Hodge has been around forever. He's
He's
been
missed the
in the
tournament lately a bunch. I think this is like
yeah.
his first tournament in a while.
I believe it looks like he was
Oh,
in
2017.
17.
Hmm.
But this is just one of the teams that has, when was the last time he wasn't in 3 or higher? It's
Right,
been a long time. So it's sustained success. You're not going to count a team like that out.
right.
Not overwhelming SIs, but you've got a 6'8" guy in the 170s, who's, uh, pretty much maxed out strength and IQ. We've talked about some players like that. Those are the guys who don't have overwhelming stats, but there's probably a lot of key moments in the game where something's happening on the floor that's impacted by those skills.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know much about this team because yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, like they made the tournament twice in the past like 5 years, but as 16 seeds.
right.
Um, so nothing like really top end until now, I guess, where they're a 3 seed. So
Yeah,
wow.
and like I said, this is one of the steady teams that I know the team name just because they're always up in high conference.
Hmm.
They've at least been to Legends at some point a long time ago. Sustained run into, is that a team that's going to make a deep run? Nothing jumps out about the roster. Their shooting guard Willis scores 20 points a game, but a lot of teams, run their offense through that position. Iona is the champion of 2.1, which was
Yeah,
a
yeah,
tough conference this season.
yeah.
Their offense runs through their point guard, which I'm trying to remember his name, but
I
I know
can't
they have a
remember.
point guard who scores a lot of points.
Stafford. Yeah, yeah,
Kirk
yeah.
Stafford, yeah. So
I remember
he,
facing this team
yeah,
at some point. Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, look at
When he
look
shoots
at
a
that
lot of
right
free
column.
throws and he makes them all.
Yeah.
And on a guy with 16 driving and 7 finishing, speaking from experience, Polk has numbers pretty similar to that. And you can get away with having him drive a lot, even though the finishing's not there. And a lot of good things can still happen from that. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, defensively, passing,
yep.
handles. I mean, he's got it all. Yeah, that right column is a lot of what we look for, like in a point guard usually.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, this is a very similar player to Polk, who's my point guard, who I think is 182 or 183 SI. But I mean, the chart, the everything on the right and just shooting and defense on the left. I mean, obviously he's got some other tens over there,
yeah,
but yeah, this is a very similar mold of player, and one that can do a lot of good things. You get him driving, kicking the ball out, trying to finish, dumping it off to big guys down low. It makes good things happen. I know with Polk, like when he's on the floor, it's a whole different thing than when he's not. Even though I have other guys who have some point guard skills, a guy who can do all of that makes a big difference.
yeah, yeah. All right, who else should we talk about here?
Marquette is a team that has been at a high level. Their starting center
Yeah.
is hurt
Oh,
at 20 points a
isn't
game,
that
Powell.
Powell? Okay, okay.
Yeah, and
And
so
I know they have a 5-star freshman who
mhm,
is playing this year in Thurman Cook, though.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, where am I? Why am I struggling
he's
with this? Okay, here we go.
15 pot true freshman.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
I was in the same conference as Marquette. I don't remember game planning for them as much as I should have
Yeah, he's
probably,
got a lot
but
of right side skills,
yeah,
and some offense. I mean, yeah, this is already a very good player, and he's a true freshman. So, I mean, get used to seeing Marquette in the tournament here.
yeah, 6'8"
Um,
as well. And that's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Anytime you're missing your starting center, it's
Yeah,
it's going to cause some questions, right? This is a
yeah.
big part of what they do. And Michael Powell. And
25 players of the game this
yep.
season. Big
Yep.
part.
And they do not have a cupcake in the first round, right? Miami is a team that came this close to promoting from 3-2, fully healthy. They've got former Texas quarterback Vince Young as their top player,
That's hilarious.
who's a
Yeah.
really nice point guard build
Oh yeah. Wow.
for
That's
them.
yeah.
Other than the driving being missing, but that just means you play a different style. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a nice player.
Yeah. And I know Miami also has another 5-star and a couple 4-stars, it looks like.
Yep.
Um, so
Yeah,
or
I
a
don't know
couple
if
five
Rowley
stars.
is playing. Looks like Rowley's redshirting, who's
Redshirt. Oh, okay.
their freshman 5-star. But
Mhm.
a lot of potential up here. There's multiple seniors at the top of this roster, so you take away the starting center from Marquette, and that's a scary matchup. And Miami is a team that could win a few games.
Yeah. Looking at that Richmond Delaware game, actually,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
mean,
So I've got to shout out before we go further with this. I
yeah,
have
yeah,
to shout out Delaware. Delaware is my once upon a time when I had a second team. None of the players on the roster are still guys I recruited, so it's
of
all Bob
course.
McKay at this point. But I'm a big fan of this Delaware squad. They picked up their first 5-star in a
Oh,
recruiting battle with Richmond, who they're
oh,
playing in the first round of the
oh,
tournament.
yeah. What a story. What a storyline.
So that's a fun one. I know there was some discussion of that in the Discord today. But
Mhm.
Delaware's a guy who I think overperformed his roster a little bit, and did a really good job managing this team this year because the size is pretty far down the depth chart. You've only got 3 guys at 160 plus, but he was a conference champion in
Yeah.
4.5, which I think had quite a few teams. That's that conference that had 5 teams come out. So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, look at those defenses look really strong. Um, they're not the fastest. They're actually like a really slow team.
Yeah, and
That
hey, I made 3 Final Fours with 2 of them with really slow teams, so it's definitely possible. But I'm not advocating that that's the right plan.
yeah, it's just interesting because,
Yeah,
like I said, with D1 especially, the higher you
yeah,
go, it
yep,
just gets faster and faster. It seems like.
yep.
So it's
And you were
interesting.
going to talk about Richmond, I think.
Yeah, Richmond. Well, I figured actually you knew more about them. I don't know as much
I don't
about
know a
them.
ton about Richmond. I mean, Peyton Bird is a big time player.
I know P. Schwartz is just so active in
Yeah,
both the Discord and the forum. So he knows how to manage
yep,
a team game planning is always hard for anyone, so I don't know.
Well, and on paper,
Of
this roster looks better than Delaware's, right?
course, yeah.
Just the top end does. There's a little more size higher in the depth chart, and so that's a big matchup, especially with the little bit of grudge match from the recruiting battle this season. A fun one to watch. So
Yeah. Let's talk about that 8-9 matchup actually, because I know I'm kind of familiar with both of these teams.
okay.
Um, Florida Gulf Coast, NAF has talked a lot about them.
Hmm.
And they just press the crap out of every team
Yeah, yeah,
they
and
face.
Florida Gulf Coast recruits 5 stars too, and they go after them hard. And they're
Hmm.
in a really good spot right now, where they've hit on a couple in the last few seasons. And
Yeah.
so, not only is this a team that has kind of a unique strategy and is strong this year, but watch out here in a couple seasons, you're going to have a really loaded top end on this team.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Obviously one of them is hurt,
Yep.
and that's not ideal for them.
Yeah, Keeler starts at point guard, but interestingly, in their first round matchup, Tufts, who's the other team,
Hmm.
also is missing a starter. So I don't know how much that bounces.
Oh, he's the guy
But
I wanted to talk about
yeah,
too.
Laura, I believe, is their starting power forward.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of Juan Lara, but he's hurt, and that's
Looks like just a
unfortunate.
1 game injury. So if they can get
Yeah.
through, he's right back in there. But yeah,
Yeah. I wanted to I put a few points in him when he was a recruit, when he was a junior, and then Tufts shows up and I was like, I guess I have to give up.
yeah,
But he's
but
he's really good.
yeah, that build is really great. A power forward who can match up inside and then has some of the outside skills as well. I've had some guys in my history, Albert Butler, Donald Gorman, who were dominant players that were good enough to match up with real inside players and then could just abuse them in the other aspects of the game. And
Mhm.
that's a big advantage.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then I guess we should just talk about the last matchup. We're already there.
Yeah.
Xavier and Bentley.
Yeah.
I know nothing about these teams.
Bentley has both guards averaging 20 points a game.
Oh
And
wow.
so it's not a team I know a ton about, but that was the thing that jumped out to me looking at this team. And it is Clark and Lane. So it's their top 2 players.
Makes sense.
Um, Presumably you're playing pretty fast with a little bit of an outside focus, which is kind of unique, right? A lot of the successful teams get the ball inside quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see what this team can do with a 7 seed. They've probably got a pretty good shot of advancing. Xavier's center is out, which we've talked about how crucial that can be.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and so that's
Henson.
Marty Henson for
Mhm.
Xavier, missing at least the first game.
Dang, he's a nice Alex on the left side.
Yep.
The right side is kind of
Yep.
lacking.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, look, we've been through all 4 regions at this point. We know how the Hardwood tournament goes. Whatever you
Yeah.
predict isn't what's going to happen. And so, definitely some of these teams we've looked through, Mississippi. I I think 2.2 is going to perform in this tournament. Well, there's 8 teams, so somebody's going to hopefully going to advance a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think you'll see some of those teams who, Wake and Misericordia, and some of those who you look at their conference record and see they went 17 and 13. Are probably going to be strong performers here. Augsburg's a team we've talked about out of D4. The strength of D4 is better than it's been ever. I think
Yeah.
D2 is better than it's been ever. I actually thought Legends was a little weak this season compared
Mhm.
to some. And so it'll be interesting to see if we're right about that. Some of the people who have speculated that this is a weaker Legends,
Right.
and see some of these strong teams from 2 and from 3 and from 4 match up with some of those teams and how those games go. So I think it's going to be a fun season to watch this D1 tournament.
Yeah. Okay. So to finish up here,
Yeah.
pick each the final 4 contestants.
Yeah, I mean, I got to go Mississippi in the East. I think they can survive a couple games without Cunningham and Slater, and then if they have good injury luck after that, that's got to be the team to beat. They're
Yeah.
loaded. Jeff White is a monster. Cunningham outscores him, even though he's a monster.
Mhm.
If I wanted a sleeper from that group, it's Oregon State for me, just because I love that team and they can score inside and out. They
Mhm.
play a fast pace, and Doty, as you saw, drops like on the regular, drops 40-point games.
Yeah, yeah. He's a flamethrower,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What about the Midwest for you?
Well, what do you think from the East?
Oh, Yeah, I mean, Mississippi would be my choice definitely, for all the reasons you said. If I had to pick like a sleeper, I would say Augsburg. Just they're
Mhm.
so hot,
Yeah.
and it's not like it's ended at all, like, and maybe that's says, well, it's going to end now.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but I
I,
mean,
I
we've
think they're
seen
good.
like Evansville last year, sometimes that hot streak just keeps going. UConn in real life when they had Kemba Walker, some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
How about the
definitely.
Midwest?
For me in the Midwest,
It's got
it's
to be
tough.
Dominican California, right?
I would like to say me. I have hope I can make it to the Sweet 16. I mean, I'd like to at least make the Final Four. That's
Yeah,
huge, to get to um to get there and get the prestige. I think my favorite. I'm not. I don't. I want to go. I'm kind of contrarian. I don't want to pick Florida State. They're
yeah,
probably the favorite. I'm going to say Temple though. Just that
yeah.
consistent hard schedule that they played. They have the talent. I think. I
Yeah.
think they're a team to watch there.
Yeah, I've watched this Florida State team lose some unexpected games this season. Again, in a crazy tough conference, but I think they stumble at some point. And I'll be honest with you, if Iowa beats Florida State in the first round, that Iowa team is so much better than its seed and even than its TPI, and it's a team that had no seniors. So this is a different team than it was the first half of the season.
Yeah.
And so I think the winner of that matchup makes a run. I would love to say I think Marist is going to duck out early, but I think that's for me that's maybe the favorite just with how strong that team is inside. But this is just a super deep conference. Any of the top six, and then there's some real danger from Asheville, my team, Iowa that could get hot. And if things click at the right time, right? If for I can speak about my team. If my small forward Del Callahan makes threes instead of missing them,
Mhm.
then my team's really hard to beat. Fortunately, about 4 out of every 5 games he misses, you know, the majority of them. But the games where he makes them, the rest of the team is super strong, and that's tough to beat. Iowa can do the same thing. I
Mhm.
think I think if you want a chaos conference, or a chaos region, it's this one. Like I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. And how about the South for you?
In the South, I mean, if Stewart was healthy, I would think Loyola was scary, but I,
Yeah.
I think for me it's Evansville, and of course they're probably going to lose tomorrow. Now that I said that, but I don't think I think we all bet against that team last year with a pretty similar roster. I know they lost some of their top end talent, but um, that's where I'd go.
Yeah. I think I'm more confident in like my sleeper pick out of this region
Mm,
than my like favorite. I,
yeah,
I think you got to watch that Ursinus New NYU matchup
yeah.
for the sleeper, at least maybe the favorite, maybe the team to come out.
Yeah, who I think
Yeah.
whoever comes out of that game is one of the bigger threats here for sure.
Yeah. A favorite, when we looked at Clark, I was impressed by, what I saw. So I,
Yeah.
I would pick them. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're probably downplaying Tarleton State just because they're not an exciting team, but
Yeah, right.
it's not like either of us think they're bad. That
Sure.
it's not going to be a shock if that team comes out of this. They've sort of defied the odds all season. So
Yeah, I mean they're number one for a reason. So
yeah, and like we've talked about, you get a big dominant big man like Hartman, and that team could make a run too. So
yeah.
how about
Okay.
the West?
West, man, I mean, Tennessee's hard to pick against, I
Yep,
think. So
yep,
I would say they're the favorite for me.
yep. Me too.
A sleeper, oh man. That's a tough one. What are your thoughts here?
Um, yeah, honestly, I really like Tennessee out of this conference. I think Texas Arlington is obviously a strong team. I struggle a little bit with a sleeper here too. I mean, I'll root for Delaware, but I don't know that he quite has the dogs to get out of this one. Um, so yeah, it's a little tougher to pick. We looked at that tough FGCU matchup, and those could be sleepers, but both of them have a significant player injured
Yeah.
for the first couple games. So uh, honestly, if I could pick one of the regions to be in, and no disrespect to any of these teams, I wish I was in this one and not the one I'm in.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I think just based on it, like the East maybe seems like the strongest,
yeah,
Midwest kind of seems like the craziest.
yeah.
But the West probably is maybe the weakest.
Yeah, but I also just think this whole tournament is tougher than it's ever been. The D1 tournament, just because the depth of good managers and good teams in Hardwood has come a long way from where it was. So.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Well, hey, we've
Okay,
spent a ton of time on D1, but
and
thanks
we still
for
got two
bearing
more
with that.
tournaments to go.
Yeah,
We probably won't spend as much time on
sure.
these next ones, but they earn their due, I think, and they deserve it. So I had a different bit of analysis, and Bridger mainly took the lead on D1, and I have D2 and D3. So I kind of
Do
did
you want
what.
to take over the screen sharing, or do you want me to kind of tab along
Uh,
with you?
no, I can take over.
Okay.
I can take over. Yeah. So we. Sorry, I'm now trying to do gymnastics with my head. Okay, so we have this, we did a similar analysis last year
Hmm.
with looking at each region's RPI strength.
Oh
And
yeah.
then we didn't do that with D1 this year, but I think we did a pretty thorough job with our analysis. So with D2 and D3, I did that though. And I mentioned to you before we started recording that both of the divisions seem a little weaker as a whole than last
Mhm.
season. So that's kind of interesting. Just looking at the average RPIs of each region, average TPIs
Yeah.
as well.
Well, and I
And
think a
yeah,
really strong group of teams graduated out of D2 last season. I know like a lot of those guys that have come up with you and with Santa Clara and been in the conferences you've been in and have joined in the Discord here, the sort of pandemic bunch, the second wave that came into the game, a lot of those teams are kind of graduating up into the higher levels. So that may be part of that
right.
too.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, here's the matchups. I'm gonna share my Excel file though, because that has all that data. So let's okay, so you can see this?
Yeah,
Cool. So it's organized by region, and then you have the RPI rank over on the left, and then I labeled every other column though.
sure.
And then I have like the out of each quad of each seed, I have the top team and then the weakest one.
Hmm,
And then I tried to pick like first round matchups that kind of look kind of tough.
sure.
So like this 8-9 matchup between UC San Diego and Western Oregon,
Yeah.
they're both the top of their respective seeds. Um,
And San Diego is just one of the highest TPIs in all of that tournament, the Division 2
yeah,
tournament.
yeah. So yeah, they're one of the top TPIs, one of the top RPIs as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was a tough matchup for UC San Diego at first because I was like, oh, Western Oregon looks good, and then you see San Diego's resume.
Yeah.
That's pretty tough. Um, let's see. You have
Yeah,
some stuff, right?
that San Diego team, has 178 SI player on it in Wyatt Joyce.
Oh, wow.
One of the highest TPIs, obviously, in all of Division 2. Um, Interestingly, was a sixth place team in their conference though. So you do wonder if the tactics and management setup there is going to actually carry them through to match up with
Right.
that talent.
Yeah, I mean, I know this was one of the toughest conferences last season, and obviously it is again.
Yep.
This season was 7 teams in. Alex J is, I mean, he's been blank for 2 years now. I thought
Yeah.
he was newer than that, but I guess not.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, this is a really tough conference in general. I mean,
Well, and there's no size on that team. If
oh
you
yeah,
if you look at the roster, and again, doesn't mean you can't win, especially at D2, you may be able to get away with that a little more. But I think that's maybe where um,
that
that team
inconsistency
struggles a
comes
little bit.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know Cornette is the starting center, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yep.
And then Fontana is that power forward. Joyce probably is the point guard, but that 7 IQ kind of a problem.
Yeah, and this is what we're going to see, right, as we start to look at D2 teams, and it'll we've got to adjust that mindset a little bit too. Of there are things that are going to look like really exploitable, obvious gaps on some of these teams, but you're talking about a little different level too, and you should expect to see some of those gaps on this team. So, that's a strong team. That's a strong matchup. Western Oregon, the other side of that matchup. Sorry, I've got to find it on my screen.
It's okay. Yeah.
Similarly, it has a little more size, kind of down their roster. And so again, if they can leverage that at all, that's where they make up that gap in
It's a bot.
PI. Yeah. And the unfortunate thing about bots in Hardwood is the default bot tactics work pretty well.
Yeah.
And, you can see from teams like Butler or other teams that get abandoned at high levels, they stick around an annoyingly long time. Also because they're well-constructed teams, but then the default tactics are pretty effective. And it's a good tip where if you're struggling with your tactics and need to kind of reset your mind, put it on default for a game and see what happens, right? Because they're not bad tactics, and it might, if it's different from what you've been doing, it might give you some insight into where you need to make adjustments.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. My tactics aren't actually that different than the bots.
Yeah.
So
well, anytime you're venturing too far from that, you better have figured something out, because there's one thing that works pretty well.
Yeah. So, I mean, we skipped over the top team here. That's Minnesota State. They were a Final Four team in D2 last year, but didn't promote.
Yep.
And
it's a 38 win team too. I mean,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
They have 2 7-footers, and a 170 point guard in Dion Joyner. I mean, it's one of the most talented teams I've ever really seen.
Yeah, Trent Sellers, who is the
center.
I think power forward for more minutes.
Okay.
I think they both play both positions a little bit, but Sellers has a 7'9" wingspan, which I don't know how many times I've seen. So yeah, look in D2, you've got to like that team just off those two. You don't even need to know much more about the roster. Doesn't even matter that much what their SI are. There's going to be teams that just have a tough time doing anything against that team.
Yeah.
So you have to like Minnesota State as one of the teams in this whole tournament for sure.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. I mean, they've got the size, they've got the talent on the perimeter. It's tough to stop.
Yeah, and Joyner is the leading scorer on that team. And that's a good setup, right? A shooting guard who is a capable scorer, because the game funnels the ball to that position, and then 2 big guys inside who stop what the other team's doing. So.
Oh, that's right. He's the shooting guard because Frick is the point guard. That's right. Yeah. And then Bradley here is a small forward who, is I should share my screen for this one. Who's just like a really nice versatile player, I think. 6'8", fast.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to go with small forward in this game, right? And it small forward for a lot of teams ends up being, if your 5th best player is a guy you thought was going to be a big, or if you thought was going to be a guard, then that's your small forward, and your team sort of trends one way or the other based on that. And this is a guy who's got point guard skills, that's playing small forward for them, and that's one of the effective ways to have a small forward who maybe isn't going to shoot as much, just because it's a little hard in the game engine to get the ball to your small forward. So a guy who's got a lot of those softer or ball handling or playmaking skills is a nice player to have in that position.
Wow, this team is going to be really good next year too.
Yeah.
Just one player graduating.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
That's a strong team.
All right, and then we've got I gotta remember which thing. High Point is a good team here. Top number 2 team. They won that tough conference in 5.8.
Yeah, they're another one of the higher TPI teams in this tournament, as well. And so, anybody in a D2 tournament with 155 TPI is going to just have a talent advantage over some teams.
Yeah. Let's see. Brockport, they were the runner-up in D3 last year, actually. So, they can manage, their teams, I think. Mavi. A couple injuries though. That's unfortunate. Um,
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know a ton about this team, but I figured they've had success. They've got, the top end talent up here,
Yep.
um, kind of on the perimeter. Briscoe looks like a really solid player, fast, strong, good defender, can
Yeah.
shoot. And then Carter, wow, look
Good
at
size
those
too. Yeah.
there. Yeah, good size at 6'7". Carter's really good at the point guard stuff.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's a good looking team. Good looking team.
Yeah, you've got a couple of players there at the top that, like we've talked about, have points in the right places.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, and then going over, what else do we have? Uh, it's tough to do
In
matchups the way I set this up, but like the top half is really strong here for this region, and then the bottom half is like pretty weak. You have the worst RPI team in St.
Yeah.
Francis. They just snuck in, winning their conference tournament. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, and what a run that is for them. Knocking off an Oregon team along the way that's a pretty strong Conference 2 team. You almost wonder what happened for St. Francis, but we see it every year, right? And you see it with your own team sometimes too. Of you have stretches of games where some of the stuff that's happening just doesn't make sense, and then you have stretches of games where it doesn't make sense in a good way.
yeah,
And so, we know that there's hot and cold streaks sort of built into the fabric of this. And so you don't expect a St. Francis team there to make a big run because they'll cool off.
yeah. Are there any like top players in this region
There's
of
not
note?
really in this region of the there's no top 50 players in
Mhm.
Hardwood in this region. I mean, obviously we've already hit on some of the good ones on a couple of the top teams.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's always harder a little bit to like go into D2. Just there's more teams.
Yeah, I mean, College of
uh
Charleston's the 3 seed.
yeah,
They've got nice depth for a D2 team. Most of their starting lineups 150 plus. They've got a 150 SI 6'11 guy, which shoot, you'll take that at any level of hardwood. So
yeah,
I mean, certainly another team that can make some noise there.
yeah, that's
Jody
scary.
Jody Wilson is that player's name. Yeah.
18 interior defense.
Yep.
Wow. That's really good.
So
Really, really good.
there's definitely some strong pieces here.
Mhm.
I want to say there's something I remember about Western Oregon. Yeah, Western Oregon's a team that has 3 160 SI players, all perimeter players, but they've
Yeah,
got some size further down the
yeah,
roster as well. So I mean,
right.
I do think this region looks like one of the stronger in this tournament for sure.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, by my measurements, it looks like the strongest. I gotta do some quick math. It looks like the strongest team or region by like RPI ranking and by RPI. That would make sense. By TPI, it's probably second
Yeah.
strongest.
Well, and it's looking at those numbers you've got up on the screen. This is a very balanced tournament across the 4 regions, right? There's
Mhm.
not a big disparity anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know a ton about all of these teams. I mean, Jackson State used to be in the same division or league as me. I know that they press a bunch.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if their roster makeup anymore. They used to
Great
have a lot of
size. They've
size.
got great size across that roster.
Mhm.
4 of their top 7 players are 6'7" or taller. Not a lot of high end TPI, but they've got a guard in Roger Douglas who has really high shooting stats.
And he's still there. Wow.
Shot over 40% from three this season, 20 plus points a game. So I mean, that team's a threat too
Yeah.
when you've got a scorer like that. I know, Valpo's tourney run D1 championship a few seasons ago that I suffered from was on the back of some defensive big guys and a shooting guard that just couldn't miss the whole tournament. So a team like that can get hot and run the table for sure.
And actually, I remember with Jackson State, they have I didn't realize so much of this roster was so similar from when
Ah,
I was in the conference. DeAndre McIntyre is a 6'8.5" point guard,
yeah.
um, who's got 17 passing.
Wow.
I mean, that's kind of crazy now to look at him.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, depending how he's got McIntyre set up. A 6'8" point guard with 16 driving and 16 finishing should be able to do some pretty good things. I notice he's only scoring
Yeah.
9 points a game, so it'd be interesting to see how he's got him set up.
I mean, the average distance is 8.5 feet, so, or 8.5, whatever. I assume it's feet.
Yeah,
So it's definitely,
ramp that green light up and let him draw 20 fouls a game. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're definitely driving a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's see. Okay, so and then one other team I want to talk about was Grambling State, because I know the president there, Mason, has been there for a long time, and I think they said they've never been in D1,
Wow.
despite being there a long time. And I'm not saying like, oh, they suck or any, that's, this
Yeah,
game
it's
is hard.
been in 6-5 the whole way. But if you look at the team history,
Yeah.
it does look like he's really starting to get it figured out. The
Mhm.
last 4 seasons, he's had 140 and 150 TPI teams,
Yeah.
where prior to that, it looked like the recruiting wasn't clicking. So for somebody
Yeah.
who's been around a long time and probably has some of the tactics figured out, if he can get that recruiting locked in more consistently, like that's a team that'll climb. So
Yeah. Unfortunately, they still aren't going to promote to D1, not
yeah.
for next season, but
Yep.
they'll get there eventually. Um, yeah. Okay. So that's the East. Let's move on to the Midwest.
Midwest, yeah.
Okay. And
So the Midwest does have a few notable specific players.
hmm,
There's actually, is Wisconsin in this region?
Wisconsin is
Is
not
not.
in
Okay.
this region.
So I'll start with Fresno because they're the 1 seed. But yeah, there's actually 3 top 50 SI players in the D2 tournament, or there's
Mhm.
4 in the D2 tournament, and 3 of them are in this region. So
Oh my
this is
gosh.
definitely the region of the star players as far as the D2 tournament goes. So Fresno State has Logan McMillan, who's a 183 SI small forward, but he has found a way to have his small forward scoring 18 points a game,
Mhm.
which is a pretty high rate there. And just literally every skill is 10 or higher on Logan McMillan.
Wow, that's really
Kind of your
rare.
dream small forward. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just 6'2", so
yeah.
you know, there's always
Yeah,
you can always wish for more.
for sure, but with a 6'9" wingspan and the 36.5 vertical, like that's still probably a player who's gonna match up okay with guys who are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7",
Mhm.
in a lot of games. So
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and it looks like a very perimeter focused team, just with what I assume is a starting shooting guard and starting point guard here,
yeah,
and
I mean
Abercrombie and
that
Zelensky.
team is 39-4 on the season. Only lost a couple of conference games. Had a really tough battle with uh, Minnesota State, who
Oh, they're in the same conference as
they are
Minnesota
in the
State.
same conference, actually finished
Wow.
ahead of Minnesota State in the conference. So, I mean,
Yeah.
5.2, definitely a little bit of bad luck that the two of them got stuck in the same conference, though they both get to promote and both get high seeds in the tournament. So,
Yeah. Wow. This is Gramblings too.
yeah.
Wow. This conference is crazy.
Yeah, 5.2 jumping out very clearly there as one of the top in 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then who are the other
Yeah,
players?
so then you've also got the 3 seed Baylor, who's got Tyrone Henderson, who is a redshirt junior at 184 SI,
Five star.
could even still pop a few more points as he heads into his senior year.
Yeah.
Only his perimeter defense is below 10.
Mhm.
Another really well-rounded player. He's using him as a small forward and power forward. But I mean, this is a guy who has all his skills in his offensive categories, but
Yeah.
only scores 12 points a game. And
Huh.
so if you can unlock a little more from that player, Baylor potentially goes on a big run. It'd be interesting to see again how you've got him set up, because that's a guy who should be able to score pretty proficiently at this level.
I feel like they play super slow.
Mm, yeah.
72 possessions a game. I mean, they could even go 64
Oh yeah. I
possessions.
mean,
That's crazy slow.
if I'm looking at their season and like uh, I think there's only 2 games all season where either they or their opponent scored 100 points in a game. And certainly coming from the season I just had, we showed you my conference of the like 90 possessions a game on half the teams.
Yeah.
It's a rare game when nobody scores 100 in my season. So that does really jump out and may explain the low scoring rate there a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it's not like there's people scoring above him on this roster.
Right.
He's still the leading scorer, so that does tell
Right.
me like, wow, this team either spreads it out, which
Yeah.
I don't really think you can quite
No,
say.
there's just not a ton of points there, right? It's a team
Yeah,
averaging 80 points a game, but they're holding their opponents to 68 a game. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's the danger there is you limit the number of things happening in the game. And so if you have a big advantage over a team, you're not spreading out your advantage across more data points in the game. And so bad luck can be a little more effective. But for the tournament, that may be a good setup, right? And obviously, it's a team that had some good success this year, so I wouldn't question too much what they're doing.
yeah, yeah. Okay, and then who was the third
Yeah,
player?
so
Who's
this
good?
is a name some people will recognize, at least from the recruiting trail, but CC Vesely on Missouri, or at
There,
least
yeah.
I recognize because it's the Central's my region, and I remember him as a prospect, big time player, 5-star recruit, probably maxed out at this point at 183 SI, which is a nice number to get to on a 12 pot. But one of the better overall defenders in all of Hardwood, and
Yeah,
and a capable scorer too. So
yeah, yeah. Vesely, definitely the leader of this Missouri team.
plays
Yeah.
37 minutes a game, by the way.
I guess with 18 endurance, he
Yeah,
can handle it.
yeah,
Um, I mean, with endurance, with the minutes, I've definitely noticed like it's not purely the stamina. I think
mhm,
the speed plays into it a lot, and he's not the fastest, so that's why you can see like he does get fatigued at times.
sure.
Um, a lot of the time.
Yeah, but I mean, playing 40 minutes in a lot of those games and not getting heavy, is something, and it's a strategy. And you have to probably play a little slower to make that happen. And so if that fits what you're trying to do, it's a good setup.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They definitely have
It's a
more
it's a
scoring.
balanced team, right? They
Yeah,
they score more overall. It's just also a more top heavy team, right, than what we just looked at with Baylor, because
right.
ultimately they're still scoring about 80 points a game, maybe up
Yeah.
a couple points more.
Mhm.
And so Baylor just really spread out across their roster versus this team who's playing their starters the majority of the game. I think you look at
Right.
Evansville last season in the D1 tournament,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
I think really did a good job of leveraging some things that people don't always think about of, hey, my injury risk, there's only 2 games left, so let's roll the dice. And I think he played his starters. I think he played them all 40 minutes in the championship game, and he
Mhm.
played a lot. He was ramping up their minutes as the thing went on and it got closer to the end. And so there's definitely something to that. And Missouri may be somebody to watch out for who's going to leverage some of those same things.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting tactic. I've kind of adapted or adopted it a little bit, but I don't know. To me, I'm a little hesitant.
Yeah.
I don't even like my players on like light fatigue, so
I'm
I
I'm
try to
with
avoid
you.
it.
Yeah. And for a long time I've not had many injuries, and this season I just got pounded by injuries, even though I was really managing minutes. So I'm
Mm,
starting to question that a little bit too. But
yeah.
yeah, so this conference, I mean, you've got Fresno, you've got Baylor, you've got Missouri, who all have really top end players.
Mhm.
Um, and then you've got a Roanoke team who's the 2 seed, who finished second. It's a bot team,
Mhm.
which again, those are dangerous teams. But I note that team because they've got 3 guys 167 or higher, including their 2 starting big men, which
Oh,
that's where you want the points to be. So
yeah.
I
And
hate to say a bot team has a good shot, but this Roanoke team would be one you'd think might advance a little bit.
it looks like the small forward is
Yeah.
the top guy. So I mean that entire front court is 167 or higher, which
Yep.
is going to be tough to deal with.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, like, if I'm sure somebody has cracked the code of what the right setup is to beat the bot tactics, but it's not easy. And I don't know that I've cracked it. I know some things that work, but I also haven't played against bots in several seasons. So,
It's true.
and so I know some of the things that used to help, but I lost to plenty of bot teams in my day, so there's no shame in that.
Yeah, same. Yeah. um, I know the 4 seed Massachusetts Maritime. Uh,
They win the
I
award for the most letters in the name of their
Are they the
team.
one that extend it a bunch?
I
Yeah.
think there's, yeah, that one's pretty bad, but
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm the one. I'm the guilty party in
you
D1.
as well, yeah.
um, yeah, I know this president at least listens to our show, so that's
Yeah.
I always try to shout them out.
Well, and
Um,
that's just such, I mean, to be where he is with 5 players 150 or higher and only one of them a senior. I mean, that's a team that's set up really well for not only this season but moving forward.
like a pretty new president. I mean, now more than half a year, so it's been a little bit of time getting used to this team. But I think the team is like finally in their image the way they wanted to mold it,
Yeah.
and so that's always a good feeling to have a lot of success with that type of team. And so I think
Yeah,
things are
and
starting to come together.
I think there's a couple not horrible, but there are some weaknesses that jump out on that team. I mean, there's
Yeah,
no interior defense anywhere on the roster,
right.
and there's not a shooter. There's 11 is the highest OS on the team, and
Mhm.
as we've talked about some, there are gonna be games where the ball just gets stuck in your guard's hands and they end up taking a lot of outside shots, and you need to have enough outside shooting that doesn't kill you. And there are going to be games where the other team just pounds the ball inside and you need to be able to do something about it. That being said, this is a strong balanced roster, and every team's going to have some weaknesses. So
Yeah,
this is a team that if they can game plan around those things, and get their matchups in the right place, could be a contender here.
for sure, for sure. Okay, and any other things of note?
Nothing else jumped out at me in this one. I mean, there are some, we've talked about a couple of the teams. Roanoke is a high TPI team for D2.
Mhm.
And so, that's going to mean something as they push forward. There's some real life basketball powers here. I don't
Right,
know much
yeah.
about Hardwood Duke, but
I don't know much either about them. I haven't come
they
across
I
them.
seem to remember they have a 5-star. Yeah, they do. So
Yeah.
they've got a sophomore 5-star who's probably going to be one of the stronger players in that region as well, though he's more of a playmaker than a scorer. So
Yeah, yeah. Um, there was Wilkes actually here, number 12. They're one of the better TPI teams
hmm.
in this region, certainly.
No, you're
Like
right. They're the
they
they're
rank
the
like
fifth
fifth.
best TPI team in this tournament.
Yeah, yeah. And so I mean,
And
that's always dangerous.
like we just talked about with Massachusetts Maritime, this is another team with 5 guys, 150 or higher. Only one of them's a senior. Similar sort of. Now, there's not much size on this team though.
Right, right. Yeah. And really very little interior defense. I mean, Zarate
Yeah,
might have to be the big guy. I mean, he's decent though.
yeah. Now this team can shoot the ball though,
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah.
so I think the thing with teams that rely on outside shooting is there's going to be more inconsistency there than there is with a team that's able to pound the ball inside. And so you worry about a one and done format like a tournament for a team like that, where
Well,
the one game that they don't shoot well could be the one where they crash out.
well, this team, I mean, it's nothing like super strong in interior scoring,
Yep.
but they have a lot
You're not wrong there.
accumulative. Yeah.
And shoot, I mean, I think on my team, the highest inside scoring is 14, and I can survive in D2. So a team with plenty of 13s and 14s. Yeah, I mean, this is a team, I don't know how fast he plays, but with that level of offense all around, should be able to outscore a lot of teams.
Yeah. And there was one other matchup I wanted to look at, this 8-9 matchup, because Southern Illinois like beat me last season, I believe. Because they had some crazy good big man. It doesn't look like he's there right now. I guess he graduated, but like they have a 177 point guard who has a lot of, I mean, 19 perimeter defense is scary.
Yeah. Was it Sherman
Yeah.
Griffin? Sorry, I got bogged
No,
down in looking for the guy who graduated last year,
no,
but
Griffin was really good. He was a small forward, though. It was
okay. Okay.
Banks. Clarence Banks was the guy
Interesting.
who was I believe Clarence Banks.
Hmm. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry, I
this
got bogged down in
that's
the.
okay.
Oh, there he is, Clarence Banks. Yeah,
This
the
guy,
Clarence the Beast Banks.
yeah,
Yeah, 18 IS is a load to handle for sure.
yeah. He like beat my like 6'10",
Yeah.
15 strength, 40-inch vertical center, like
Yep.
beat him down.
Yep.
I think he scored like his career high against him. Um, and but they play against a team in Columbus State who I was particularly interested if Banks was still there because this
Hmm,
team has a 7-footer who is also really good,
got it.
Caden Flint. 16 IS, just
Yeah.
5 OS though, in foreign finishing.
Yep, and like we've talked about, not a very high SI player, but a lot of those points are in the right place. I think the thing that jumps out to me on Flint is the 5 strength, and
Yeah,
so if you can, get somebody who can outclass that inside, he may have some games where he struggles or fouls a lot, but that size is a big deal.
the reason why I could beat this team all the time last year is because this guy, their top SI guy, for not just this season but last season, he came
Yeah,
off the bench last year. I wonder
interesting.
if he's still coming off the bench. No, he's starting. Oh,
Yeah,
oh, I guess I'm wrong. He came off the bench one year when I was playing him.
sure,
So
sure, sure.
sorry. Okay, so
But yeah, for
yeah,
a team that has a lot of shooting, they don't shoot a very high percentage, and so not sure what all's going on there. But um, I think that is a tough matchup, and some good players there as well. But yeah, you've got to I mean, in a D2 tournament, you've got to like some of that top end talent to shine through
for
for
sure.
for Fresno, Baylor, Missouri, and then you wonder if some of those more balanced teams we talked about, like Massachusetts Maritime, if that can outweigh some of the top end talent in
Yeah.
in this region.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the South because this region is crazy. Um, like Randolph Macon had a great year at 40-4.
Mm,
Um, and I know the president, I saw him like earlier, right when I was preparing, like he was online.
yeah.
um, and a good team, but by TPI, they're the worst. They're the lowest ranked number 1 seed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is Kingsville, isn't that the second team for
Uh, Rob dropped them.
Rob dropped Kingsville? Okay. I
Yeah,
assume they're
yeah.
still very tall though.
Yeah, a bunch of them are still there because he just dropped them like at the beginning of the season.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Randolph Macon, they 3 4 stars and a 5-star. Wow, I did not know all
Wow,
that.
yeah.
That's okay. So they got top end talent.
Yeah, and a 13 pot 6'10 redshirt freshman. I mean, is this team promoting? I
I would
think they
assume so.
are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, so the player we're talking about here is Dan Cunningham. And I mean, that looks like one of the top players in Hardwood very quickly, is
Yeah,
Dan Cunningham, here in the next couple seasons.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously they got 3 guys at 160 above that.
Yeah.
Um, I would assume Birch is like a power forward.
Hmm.
Looks okay. And Munoz and Manto in the backcourt.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's not a ton of size at small forward and power forward there, but
Maybe
decent.
Munoz is small. He doesn't even start. What? Oh my gosh.
No, he is playing backup point guard minutes after starting for the last 2 seasons. So, I
Interesting.
wonder what was frustrating about his performance. Obviously, a guy who shot pretty poorly as a starter his first 2 seasons. So, and is shooting better this year. So sometimes that's the way it goes too. Is you make a change and it's working for you, and you just stick with it.
Yeah, yeah. The one I said they're the lowest TPI team. Um, because that's interesting because they face a team at the 16 seed who's got a TPI of 153 or almost
Mhm.
154. That's a TPI advantage in favor of the 16 seed by like 9 points.
Yeah, and if you look at Elizabethtown, I mean, that's probably the best top 6 players, just SI wise, that we've looked at in this tournament.
Yeah,
Um, but this is a
but
team that went 19 and 11 in a conference 5. And so, obviously there's some flaws there.
and I mean the big flaw you see is that there's no one of significance.
Yep.
So Jacobs is redshirting for sure. I
Yep.
mean, well, he's played 0 games. Maybe he plays his 5 games now.
Yep.
Um, but no one of significance taller than 6'5".
Yep. No, and I mean it's apparent as soon as you look at the roster. I'm sure they can win games, but we've seen some teams already in this tournament, 2 7-footers, multiple high SI guys starting,
Yeah,
down
that five
low.
star we
Yep.
that they are
That we
have to match
just
up with.
looked at in the first round. That's where this team struggles, and that's a learning process of recruiting in this game that I think everybody goes through at some point.
Yeah,
Of I want to get the best players with the highest pot and the highest SI, and then you eventually realize that that 2-star guy who's going to grow to be 7 foot is probably the most important person in my recruiting class, even though I have these three shiny new, guards who are going to
right,
have big SI numbers. But
right. Yeah, so I mean that's an interesting matchup. They also play guys like kind of all over,
mhm.
especially on the perimeter. Like this guy has played 2 through 4. I mean, point guard
Yeah,
is point guard. This guy's
yeah,
been a power
that's a
forward, a
really weird
shooting
spread.
guard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel's usually pretty much the center exclusively. Peng though,
Yeah, I mean,
one,
it
three,
looks like they've
four.
pretty much got two guys locked into a spot, and then those other guys are all over the depth chart,
Yeah,
and getting time. And I mean, that makes sense when you've got a team where the height's pretty unilateral across the team that you're going to move them around some. But
yeah,
not a bad team, right?
right.
Elizabethtown. If they luck into some games where they don't get abused too badly inside, then they'll beat people up outside just with multiple good perimeter players. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the
Um,
question is how well are people going to game plan against them? I think at this point in the D2 tournament, people are going to be able to beat a team like that, where maybe
yeah,
several seasons ago, you had a lot of managers who weren't paying that close attention at this level. That's changed now.
right. So like if we were doing a challenge bracket though,
Mm,
this game is ripe for a round
a
one
big
upset
upset, yeah.
because Barry, I mean, first off, they're a bot. Second
Yep,
off, their best player and their starting point guard is
yep,
out.
yep.
I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. You go to a team now that has, only two starters at 150. And as we've looked around, there's a lot of teams in D2 at this point that start a full starting lineup of 150 plus players,
Mhm.
which used to be just like a golden ticket in D2. My experience at this level is from from not long ago, but from a different era where it was mostly bots that you were
Right.
playing against who didn't recruit very well. And so there's a lot of strong teams here, and if you don't have much depth and then you have a big injury, it's going to be a problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, Barry's in a tough spot for that first game.
Yeah, I mean, big talent drop off just after the top 3, which is now the top 2. There's
Yeah,
not a lot of size here. The defense isn't great.
yeah, and
It's
that
yeah.
and that Luther team on the other end of that matchup is not a bad team.
Hmm.
They've got a 7-footer, and they've got a 170 SI small forward.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so tough matchup there for Barry. Barry's a
Yeah,
team that I recognize the name, right? From having some decent seasons, from fighting for some top tier recruits, and so has been around a while. I think that user, or at least there have been active users on that team for a long time.
they're bought
Oh, they're a bot
now.
now.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
probably some leftovers there from. Nope, they haven't had a president in a long time, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
There's like a couple berries, so maybe
Yeah,
this is a
maybe
different
that's
one.
it. Yeah.
um, yeah, the rest of this conference, I mean, this Wisconsin Idaho State matchup is pretty tough for Idaho State. I know.
Yeah, and Wisconsin does have a top 50 player in Joe Mundy,
Hmm.
who's one of and it has some decent size too, and a really nice right side of his build. So a very big point guard.
Yeah.
And so I remember, oh man, I'm not going to remember what team it was, but I think it was Lane. I don't know if it's Lane University or Lane College, and this was 10 seasons ago. And they made this deep tournament run from a low seed, and it's because right before the tournament they moved one of their wing players to point
Mhm.
guard, and he was like 6'8" and like 280 pounds and had decent guard skills. and he steamrolled my team and a bunch of other teams. And Steve actually made some balance changes after
Yeah.
several of us sent him some messages. This was a bunch of seasons ago, so it's going to be hard to remember.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, he made a finals run right there. I think it was that season. And I think if you look at that one, you'll see he beat me along the way in his tournament run.
You know, and you mentioned that because they had a very similar player. This guy, Joseph Lee, you might be talking about Ernst, is what I would guess.
This is a long time
Yeah,
ago, so
I think
yeah,
this
I'm
is
not
the guy.
100% sure.
6'8", 270 pounds as a point guard. Yeah, I think this is your guy.
That may be the guy. Yeah, it's going to be. I'd have to like dig up for my Discord post complaining about it, but that may be the one. Yeah. So
Yeah, because they have a very similar player in Lee here, 6'7",
yeah, that guy
215
played
so
31 minutes a game at point guard that
yeah,
season. So yeah.
yeah. Like in this guy, because I had to face this guy, 28 minutes at point guard his sophomore
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
and 17 in his junior year. So I mean, it was different precedents, so it's not like it's one person's philosophy. So it's interesting that it carried over
Yep.
a couple of different eras.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there may have been a recruiting overlap there or something. Well, no, that's pretty far apart. So anyway,
Yeah.
I do think that strategy doesn't work quite as well
Mhm.
as it used to. But that doesn't mean, I think that's a pretty imposing player there for Wisconsin at this
Right.
level.
Yeah. So that was Monday. Yeah. And so yeah, that matchup versus Idaho State does not look very nice.
Yeah,
Or for Idaho State, it doesn't look
right.
very nice. But yeah, I mean, like this conference here by my notes has a lot of like the weakest teams
Mm,
in their respective brackets.
yeah.
So it's interesting. It's almost like the opposite of the East, really.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, and
but
so that's one where, somebody can make a run through there for
mhm.
sure. And it's you wouldn't be shocked to see a lower seed come out of there.
Yeah, yeah. But we can move on to the West,
Sure.
unless you have another thing to
No,
note.
no, no, that's all good.
Okay. Um, in this region, um, I don't know. It's pretty balanced, I'd say. Um,
Yeah, you've got a 39 win team in Irvine, which to me, right at this level, somebody who's dominated the regular season, all the teams are coming from the same conference level. So I'd put quite a bit of stock in those regular season performances as the favorites. And Irvine's a pretty strong team.
I mean, they're on a 24 game
Yeah.
win streak. That's as hot. They might be the hottest team in like all of Hardwood.
I would be surprised if there's anybody else who can match that. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul Mueller is, I guess, the star. I want to say Liddell Nelson is redshirting this year, though.
Hmm.
So their second guy in SI is
Yeah.
redshirting, but I think he's played 0 games, so it's possible.
Looks
He
like
has
he's
1 game.
actually played
4 games.
4 games, so he's got 1 game left. So
Got
yeah,
1
you've
game.
got to pick your spot to use him, but I would imagine you'd get that 1 game in somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. And then a pretty solid team throughout. Top 7. I think I'm bad at math. Yeah, at 145 or above. A lot of size here, right? 4 guys above 6'6". So, and even Pablo Guzman here. So, I mean, it's a tall team. It's not super deep because it's cut off like right there. I'm not sure which of these freshmen are playing, if
Right.
any. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's got to be the favorite in this group.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Eckerd being at number 2, a former conference foe for me. Let's see what they got. They got a couple injuries, unfortunately. I know this team, they demoted mainly because their bigs were so young, and obviously they're a year older. So I think they might be a little better able to handle, this
Right.
tournament.
It's a team with a lot of regular season success. 27-3 won their conference. And yeah, and some real high-end talent there on Eckerd. They've got a couple guys who just missed the top 50 in Hardwood there.
Oh wow. Yeah, but West being hurt is kind of a big deal. He's their starting point guard.
Yeah. And if they
You
can
know,
get through one game, they've got him back.
right.
And yeah, I mean that 18 perimeter defense, if you move him around onto the other team's best player, that's a big impact.
I know throughout his career he's played a bunch of like small forward and
Mm,
shooting guard.
yeah,
But this year he's primary point
mostly
guard.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, you know, having a game against a 15 seed, although Nazareth, you know, they're very active. They won their conference tournament. They're really hot.
Mhm.
Um, they're dangerous though, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I see an Illinois team in that group that I know just from recruiting in the Central
Yeah.
has a pretty good eye for, I often see his name pop up on players I'm looking at. And there's some
Mhm.
good players on that roster as well. Some top end shooting there.
Yeah.
And not a lot of interior defense. So,
Right.
that's maybe where they get exposed a little bit, but a
Yeah.
solid
Yeah.
team.
And they play against let's see, Eastern New Mexico. Yeah. I was looking at a
Sorry,
different.
yeah, Illinois is up against Eastern New Mexico. Florida's a good team in this region with size and pretty good starters. It's a team with no depth, but like we said, sometimes in the tournament, especially, you can get away with that. So I would
Yeah.
I would look at Florida as another team that could make a run here with two 6'10" players and four 160 plus players. That's kind of a loaded roster for this level.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I feel like Northeastern State is dangerous, but I forget.
Hmm.
They're not my favorite team. Although they got the defense. I think they've got okay sized, a lot of rebounding. This isn't Thor's team, but I don't think it's who I was thinking of. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I'd
let's
look at
see.
Irvine, Florida, as probably the favorites here. There's,
Yeah,
there's some other names that jump out. Eckerd obviously
has
has
that top
has
end.
some has a the highest top end for sure in the group. So,
Yeah,
you kind of look at the chalk here. I'm clicking through a couple of the lower seeds, and there's there's a gap between the top seeds and the lower seeds in this
for
region,
sure,
maybe more so than the others.
for sure. All right.
And we know how these tournaments work. It all that will go out the window tomorrow, but
Yeah, seriously.
on paper.
I won't bother you to ask for your final four picks because I know this will be hard. Number one, it's just a crapshoot, and I mean, yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah,
have
I
any
mean
idea.
we've talked about some of the stronger teams in each group. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be able to go beyond much of what we've already said for
Yeah,
the groups. We know how chaotic this tournament's going to be, and
right.
so best of luck to everybody who's in it. Look for those mismatches and try and find ways to leverage it.
Yep. All right, let's move on to D3,
Sure.
shall we? And here, we'll start with the East again. You got number one Bam on Holocron's former team. They're bought now.
They dropped. Oh man.
Yeah, I think he moved
You,
to Colorado.
Now yeah, and oh, that's right. So that just means Nobody Jones is now going to run away with the Puerto Rican scene.
Yeah, and you can see Nobody Jones's team, Rio Piedras, down here
Yep.
already making a tournament appearance in
Yeah,
his
for
like
those who don't know, that's the
third
former
year.
manager of Butler, who built easily the most dominant program in all of Hardwood, and thankfully he's only 2 seasons in. Get ready here, 5 or
Here they
6
come.
seasons from now to start getting pounded by that team regularly for all of us. So yeah.
One of Nobody Jones's Butler's former rivals in Legends. I won't say who. Um, Pointed me to like the like model of that they're building here, and it's just really interesting. Like they play no zone. I forget now. I gotta look. They go very extreme though. One way.
Mm.
Right. Yeah.
All
All
man, yeah.
man. All man. No zone. No pressure.
Mm.
Um, and obviously this Nobody Jones knows how to recruit, what to look for.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting.
It's interesting because his Butler teams, I mean, I played him as a rival every season for a long time, was in a conference with him a couple times. And the Butler teams were often pretty traditionally built with just big time scoring guards and and strong interior presence, and kind of filling in around that. I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to what he's doing, but those teams didn't look drastically different from a lot of the other teams around. It just, he seemed to have a really good grasp on the tactics and management. So Rio Piedras, for everybody, is a team worth keeping an eye on what they're doing, because that's a D6 team with a manager who is much better than it would appear from just looking at this team. And again,
Yeah.
we'll see that. I'm sure we'll see that play out in big ways. But
Yeah.
so yeah, we don't need to dwell on that too much. But I wouldn't bet against that team in this tournament, just because even if they're not the most talented, there's they're going to be able to game plan well, and against a lot of bots and against a
Mhm.
lot of newer managers.
I just think it's interesting how quickly they rose
Yeah.
from when Nobody Jones took over, and like you can see the type of recruiting. Obviously, like they're kind of limiting themselves to Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands, but they're definitely going into like other places to look for like values. Because I know this guy's out of California, I know this guy's out of New York.
Yeah.
Um, so
When you
yeah, it's interesting.
see there's significant size in what he's recruiting,
Mhm.
there's players with already double-digit numbers on key skills for the positions they're playing. I mean, it's going to be a lot harder to recruit out of Puerto Rico than it was in Indiana. As someone who's benefited from recruiting in Indiana
Mhm.
for many seasons, to the complaints of the rest of Hardwood, there were some advantages being at Butler for sure, that he won't
Right.
have here. But yeah.
Right. So I like how we started in the East and then we just talked about Rio
Well, and,
Piedras
and
West.
with E3, we may jump around a little bit
Yeah.
more. I mean, the two Puerto Rico teams, one's a bot team, but that has a roster that's well built by a good player for a long time.
Yeah.
Will probably have success down there. It's a 40-win team. When you've got a lot of bot teams playing each other, the ones that had a user actually recruit the roster are going to beat the ones that just have a randomly, arranged roster.
Yeah. So I mean the presidents that I know of, and here's LT Martin's second team, Amherst. I mean, this is the North Greenville, I think,
Okay.
president. So yeah, this is a second
Yeah,
team.
that's a very successful team.
Here's UAB's second team, president's second team, if
Yep.
Fontbonne. Anonymous. Let's see who else. I don't know what other human teams we have in here. But I mean, you can see the TPIs, like Corpus Christi being really weak, but having such a good year. That jumps out to me definitely.
Yeah. I'm pulling up that team because there's only one player over 140. They do have two 6'10" big men that I presume play quite a bit in Gaines and Beverly.
Mhm.
That's probably where most of that comes from.
They're like the
You've got,
same player.
yeah,
They're very, very
yes.
similar.
Yeah, and I mean both are averaging a double double, so I
Wow.
guess it's not that hard to figure out what's going on with that team. They
Yeah.
they just have two big men who are probably better than the front courts of everybody they play. So
Right, right. Yeah, that's great. That's wow. Sheesh. That's cool. Um, and
Christian
then
Christian Brothers is one of the higher TPI teams in
yeah,
this conference, and one of the
yeah.
stranger names of a university you'll find. Uh,
Yeah, the Buccaneers. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, three, four, five guys above 150.
Yep.
I don't know if that's their starting lineup though. It looks like probably Ortega is center. I don't know. Do they start Betts at center? That'd be
They do start Betts at center, or at least Betts
wow.
plays the most minutes at center. And so, yeah, that's a very undersized team. But, they seem to have gotten away with it at the level they're at. So.
Yeah, the perimeter defenses are really good, especially compared to the interior defenses. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, there's other, I'm jumping around a little bit between the regions. I think SIU Edwardsville is the highest TPI team in this tournament.
I think so. They are. I remember highlighting them at the beginning of the season. I gotta find them, but they're like a 12 seed.
They are a lower seed. They are not a bot team, so there's at least somebody running that team.
Mhm.
For some reason, that name sticks out to me. I don't know if I've played them in it. They used to be in D4, so maybe I've just been in a conference with this team before. But I mean, that's the highest TPI team in it. They've got 3 160, 6 150 or higher.
Wow.
Again, no size, but I think that's just what you're going to see a lot at D6 from a
Yeah,
lot.
I think so. I think so. Where are
UH
they?
Hilo's in the tournament. That's whose third team is that?
Uh, Fuzzy, I want to
I think
say.
I think you're right. I think that's Fuzzy's third team. So you can probably expect some really weird lineups from that team, at least from my experience playing against Fuzzy.
Oh, really? Okay, okay. I mean, I've never
That
played
he
against them,
doesn't
so I don't
always
know.
play guys at the position you'd expect. Now maybe on his lower tier team that hasn't played out yet, but I've always enjoyed his roster building because it
Mhm.
flies in the face of some of the stuff I think, and then he has success with it anyway. So it's a I I like looking at what Fuzzy Banana's doing.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, I've never come across any of their teams, so I don't know too much about like their actual style, but obviously a very good president who's been playing for a long time. So yeah, it would be tough because they play Dubuque, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, and
So
as we've seen, a lot of managers who have a second or third team, are able to have success in the conference season, but playing all bot teams, we do watch people crash and burn out of these tournaments against bots pretty regularly.
yeah,
And though
yeah,
we've had human winners at least of the last several D3 tournaments, I think.
I think so. Yeah, Hawaii last year definitely was. Yeah, Palkify in South Alabama, Coach Birdie here. Yeah, it was Southwestern Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I mean, it looks, maybe 9 of the last 10 or so, 8 of the last 9,
Mhm,
where
mhm.
earlier on in Hardwood, it was rare that it wasn't a bot, at
Yeah, right.
least at that level. So,
Or D2 with 4 straight bots up here.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, and then the Stetson was one team we looked at early this year as like a big threat. And they performed like it. They're number one
Mm.
seed, a 169 SI, 167 SI, uh, and then a 156. So that's their perimeter three guys.
Yeah, they've got a 6-6 center, which honestly, from some of the last few teams we've looked at, is reasonably good
Yeah,
size
right, right.
in this, in their region and in their tournament. And so you've got to figure that's one of the strong teams here too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, and then
As far as
hmm,
standout players in this tournament goes, there
mhm,
actually is a top 50 player in the D3 tournament. I
that's right.
believe
Yeah,
Skidmore is the team, the 3 seed in the Midwest.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And they've
Skidmore.
got Sebastian Clement,
Mhm.
who is a very nice looking player.
Two-time conference player of
Yeah,
the year. Or not conference player of the year, all conference.
two-time all
Player of
conference
the year.
player, yeah, and is going to graduate just in time to never make it out of 6. But at least he helped his team promote this season. But
Yeah,
yeah, you've got to figure that's the best player in this D3 tournament, right? Because not only is it the highest SI, that's a pretty solid build too, for a perimeter
right.
player.
Well, I mean, you say that, but at number 51, I know your cutoff was
I did
50.
cut it off at 50. Yeah, who am I
But
missing?
at number 51 is point guard for Alma, who is a number one seed in the West.
Sure.
Um, so, Lance McCurdy here,
Oh yeah, that's a nice player too.
um, can shoot great perimeter defense, really good speed. A little small, but great
And
ball
in
handler.
exactly the same boat of he finally helped his team promote just in time to not be on the team anymore. But
Yeah, two-time conference all conference
yep,
player, also
yep,
freshman of the
former
year.
freshman of the year. Yeah, some nice mirroring there. So
That's
yeah,
funny.
I mean those are, if there's going to be a player who's going to carry his team, it's maybe one of those two here in this tournament. So.
Yeah. Any other standout teams? I mean, you see some bigger names, right? Purdue, Michigan State.
Mm. Now Michigan State has been doing some serious recruiting, haven't they?
Yeah, I believe this year was a solid year for them. No, I'm so wrong. They haven't recruited anyone.
Okay, I must be thinking a couple years back. But
Maybe,
I
yeah.
mean, that's a
Sorry, I
team.
thought so too.
That's another team that has, or maybe they were just in on some top prospects because I know I have
Yeah, we can
noticed
take.
that that user's been a little more active.
Well, yeah, they lost on two 3 stars
Yeah.
who both looked like good
Well,
players.
and I mean, look at that recruiting board. This is somebody who has figured out how to recruit ahead and stay in state and all
Mhm.
that. So, yeah, some solid stuff going on there. So,
Yeah.
like you said at the beginning, I apologize. I don't know a ton about these D3 teams.
Okay.
I have been getting the itch to get a second team again at some point. So, I may get back in on this action. At, here along the way, but
Mhm.
Edwardsville Christian Brothers, who there's a Cal State team in here, San Marcos,
San
who's a one
Marcos, yeah.
seed that also has a pretty high TPI, and I don't think we've looked at them yet. So,
Yeah, we can take a look at them. Yeah, we owe it to the 1 seeds, I guess.
yeah, and I mean the top end of that roster looks pretty strong.
Yeah,
Again, no
yeah.
size, but we're used to seeing that here.
Right. I mean, you would figure Steen, I guess, is the starting center,
Yeah,
but
I
then
would think. Yeah.
I think Say is the power forward.
Yep, looks like it.
And I mean, that's listen, I mean, yeah, we've seen some really flawed players.
Yep.
So, you know, he's got the raw overall skill.
Well, and you've got big time shooters at I'm guessing both guard spots there with
Yeah,
Renteria and McGowan, right?
McGowan.
So I mean that's the strength of this team,
Yeah.
is the guard play, and they went 28-2 in their conference, ahead of Edwardsville, who we just got done talking about being the top TPI team in the
Mhm.
tournament. So I would say you've got to think San Marcos as well, one of the favorites here.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. Um, this team, Western New England, had a big season. I remember.
Hmm.
Oh, so we said UC Irvine was the hottest team.
Yep, never mind. We found it.
Wow, 33 game win streak. Not in a great conference because obviously they dominated by a lot, but they're still only a 4 seed. So that kind of speaks to their conference, I guess. Great year though, and this was that team who had a guy Hughes, I believe. It was
Hmm.
mentioned in Discord, right? This guy has like not played 1 minute of his career.
Oh yeah, this just came up. What a sad thing.
Well, he might have to because this was their starting point guard, Rivers, and
Yeah.
he's hurt.
I just wouldn't expect at this point
Oh,
that
not
Hughes is
starting,
going to
sorry.
find his way in there,
I guess
which is a disappointing thing to spend 5 years at a school. He even took the time to redshirt him.
I know, yeah, it's not weird. He had a plan and then just threw it out the window,
Yeah.
or maybe never changed
Well,
the minutes.
I mean, anyway, we don't need to go too deep on this, but does the
Yeah,
user still log in? Because that would be the real mystery.
I believe so because they've been posting on the forums
Oh,
a
okay.
lot lately.
Okay. Well, there
Because
you go.
because
Yeah, he's
they're a part of this like New England group now that's forming.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
which
cool.
is cool. Um, any other teams striking you?
No, I mean, Sewanee, James Madison, Wofford are probably the other teams with higher TPIs that you'd wonder, maybe those are some of the teams that
Is James
that may
Madison
make
in
some
here?
noise as well. I
Is
believe
James
so.
Madison in here?
Did I just make that up? I don't think I did.
It's well because it's interesting because Sewanee is James Madison's president. Like that, they have both teams actually.
Yeah, I don't know what I did there. Maybe I just flubbed a name when I was typing out my
Johns
note.
Hopkins, maybe
Maybe
that would
that's
be
what I
like the
was looking
closest.
at. Yeah.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, yeah, no one
No,
else
that's
really
not who
rings
it
a
was.
bell.
I think I just put a team who wasn't in the tournament in my list, so my apologies there.
No
But
worries.
but I think Wofford is in though, right?
Yeah, Wofford is in. Wait, no, I don't remember typing them.
Okay. Well, clearly I was not paying close enough attention when I made my D3 list.
That's okay.
So
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's always harder to talk about D3. It's just because you certainly are much further away, and it's been a few seasons since I've been in
Well,
D3
yeah,
too.
and I mean, like we've said, for people running teams at this level, the tournament's just a bonus, right? Because what you're building for when you're in D6, or what you should be building for when you're in D6, is getting that sustained recruiting model, starting to recruit ahead. If you win games in the tournament, great. But what you're really trying to do is promote and set up your team to be successful year to year. And so it's not to diminish the success anybody has in the D3 tournament, because it's still an achievement. You've still got to game plan effectively, figure out how you're going to beat the teams you're up against. But your bigger goal when you're at this level is, how do I turn this team into one that can win multiple years in a row, not how do I turn this into a team that's going to be really successful just this year.
Yeah,
Yeah, spend a little less attention on this level makes sense. But yeah, best of luck to those who are in the D3 tournament that are watching. If you figure out the secret to beating bot teams, please share it with all of us in the Discord, because it's useful information, and
yeah,
I know I haven't quite unlocked it. But yeah, there's definitely some good teams, as we just saw, right? But there's a handful of good teams in this tournament, and there's no guarantee that they'll be the ones who win it, just because
seriously,
the
yeah,
amount of randomness at this level, and that doesn't mean that those teams did anything wrong. That's the longer you play Hardwood, the more you can have a team that outperforms another team, but on the one day you play them, you might lose by 60.
yeah, yeah,
And try not to reinvent what you're doing because of that. Just take it as one of those days. So yeah.
yeah. The other thing with D3 though is like, especially as D1, as analyzing D1 more so now,
Mm.
like a lot of these players we've seen, it's easy to pick out like the flaws, the weaknesses,
Yeah.
but like almost every roster, certainly every roster will, but each player is likely to have something to pick at that, the wrong matchup can exploit, you know,
Yeah,
or
I
the
think
wrong simulation.
I think on some level at D3, it's almost more about leveraging your strengths, where the higher you go, it becomes more about minimizing your weaknesses.
Mm,
And not that those two things are irrelevant in the opposite case, right? But when you have a lot of strength on your roster, it's shoring up those weaknesses so they can't be exploited. When you're fighting in D6 for recruits and you just haven't had the team long enough to build up that sustained success, it's identifying the things that you're able to do really well, that other teams can't, and using that to win. So
yeah. Okay. Anything else?
no, it's been a long haul. Thanks for bearing with me.
No, thank you so much. It's, almost 2.5 hours. And I can't thank you enough for joining me, and analyzing all these tournaments, all these games and teams. It was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of fun insight. Love coming on. Love what you guys are doing. Keep it up. And
Thanks.
I think a big part of, we've talked throughout these couple hours about how the game has just gone to a different level, right? Like, I think D2 is better than it's ever been. I think D4 is better than it's ever been. Or Conference 2, Conference 4 is better than it's ever been.
Mhm.
Conference 1 is about to be a nightmare these next few seasons,
Yeah.
as all these teams bubbling up. And there's some teams who are starting to unlock the secrets to being able to maintain that success instead of kind of riding the waves. And that's something I'm trying to work towards too, where my team's definitely riding waves. And you know, now if you do that, you're going to be in danger of falling far,
Hmm.
if you mistime that. And so, but I think what you guys have been doing has been a big part of that, of making some of the knowledge that was being hoarded more out there. And I think it's cool, giving people an opportunity to come on here, share some of what they know, bounce ideas back and forth. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Keep doing what you're doing. And everybody, I think you guys make a point of saying this a lot, but we all owe a ton to Steve for just making this awesome game, keeping it free. It's a lot of fun, a great way to invest some time. But check out the Discord. If you haven't been on there, there's links in the forum. Keep watching the podcast, subscribe to these guys. They're awesome. And And yeah, I don't know what else we need to say, but
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you so much for everything. All those kind words and plugs. Yeah. All right. So till next time, good luck in the tournament, everybody. Or invitational games, those matter too. But yeah. All right. Till next time, guys. See you later.